name is Maylene and thank you so much for being here because today we are going to be recapping the first season of The Umbrella Academy. Okay, so you might be wondering, Maylena, why are you recapping The Umbrella Academy? The last season literally came out like 2 months ago. There's absolutely no reason to do a recap on this. Also, no one's asking you to do a recap on this, so why are you doing this? First of all, let me answer the last question. Someone did ask me to do a recap of this. It's one of my best friends, so if she's watching this, hi! I'm doing this for you, but also for me, because after watching the fourth and last season, the fourth and final season, there's only 4 seasons in this show, thank God. It was so horrible that I had a hard time processing it. It started to make me question whether or not the show was ever actually good, so I needed to go back and rewatch it to confirm to myself that it was good. And then I finished season 1 and I was like, oh my god, this is one of the greatest TV shows ever, and if they had stopped at season 1, this would have been like phenomenal, show-stopping, groundbreaking, you know what I mean? But they didn't stop with season 1, they kept going for 4 seasons, and so now here I am recapping 4 seasons of The Umbrella Academy. But in this video, I'm only going to do season 1 because each season is pretty contained within their own like story. Okay, so before I go into the plot of the show, I'm going to give you guys some context regarding our main characters and their situations, just because The Umbrella Academy is a very plot-heavy show, and it's also only 10 episodes long. Like, seasons 1, 2, and 3 are 10 episodes. Season 4 is 6, which is a horrible number. Because we have to like get through the plot, there isn't too much exposition, and they don't really care to explain things. They kind of just throw information at you, and they gotta hope that you catch on to it really quick. So I'm just gonna give you a little bit of context right off the bat, and then as we go along, we'll fill in all of the missing gaps, okay? In universe, during the 12th hour of October 1st, 1989, coincidentally, I'm filming this on October 1st, 2024. Did I plan that? Kind of. I'm a fucking genius. If I were smarter, I would have released this video on October 1st, but alas, during the 12th hour of October 1st, 1989, 43 women around the world gave birth simultaneously, and this is interesting only because those 43 women were not pregnant when the day began. So upon hearing about the birth of 43 Immaculate Conception children, eccentric billionaire Sir Reginald Hargreaves, that's him, Sir Reginald Hargreaves, he goes around the world and he tries to find and acquire as many of these children as possible, and by that I mean he illegally buys these children. I say illegally because I don't know if any forms were signed, I don't know if the government was involved. So we first see him in 1989 when he is purchasing 7 of these miracle babies, and he looks like this the entire time. He doesn't age, he doesn't change his look. This is just kind of how he is for the entire show. Upon adopting 7 of the miracle babies, Reginald Hargreaves takes them back to his city block mansion in some undiscernible city. They are raised as a crime-fighting superhero team called the Umbrella Academy. Why does he turn them into a crime-fighting superhero team? It's because they have powers. How did he know that they had superpowers? No clue. He's kind of like a plot catch-all. If they don't really know how to explain some of the intricacies of their lore, they kind of just slap him there, and they're like, he knew the entire time. Which isn't really an answer, but it's what they do. As you can guess, he's very abusive. I'm not going to detail all of the ways in which he abuses the children, because we do kind of get into that later. Reginald didn't name the 7 children that he bought. Rather than referring to them by names, he referred to them by numbers. It's very 11 from Stranger Things core. So this is number 1, or Luther. Luther has the power of super strength, which is super boring, especially since he is the de facto team leader, as you can guess by the fact that he's number 1. Because of his position as number 1, there's a lot of pressure put on Luther, and he, because of this, becomes extremely susceptible to Reginald's point of view. Luther's the one that stays at the Umbrella Academy the longest. He lived under their father's thumb for a lot longer than any of his siblings, and this makes him incredibly sheltered, very naive. He's not very good at reading social cues. He's also, I want to note, I don't know if you can really see it in this picture, but Luther's very physically large, and I don't mean like he's fat, I just mean he has like an insane stature, you know? It's huge. It's a little bit bodybuilder-esque. When we meet Luther, he's on the moon. That's all you need to know. This is number 2, or Diego. Diego's power is trajectory manipulation, which is also kind of lame, but significantly cooler than super strength. Basically has the power to manipulate the trajectory of airborne objects, I think. I don't know. His main expertise is in knives. He throws knives, he likes knives, I think that's it. I think that's all we see him do. I think he just throws knives. In the comics, because I didn't mention this earlier, but the Umbrella Academy TV show is based on the comic series by Gerard Way of My Chemical Romance. Incredible, show-stopping, stunning, whatever. In the comics, Diego has the secondary power of being able to hold his breath for indefinite amounts of time. Like, I guess he just doesn't need to breathe to live. The show does not adapt this power because it is physically dangerous for the actor to do. So his only power in the show is trajectory manipulation, and I love it nevertheless. So because Diego is number 2, he has some inherent beef with Luther because Diego doesn't believe that Luther is a good number 1, and he believes that he should be number 1, except he's so, like, aggressive and hot-headed and just kind of, like, self-conscious about his inability to prove himself to their abusive father that he also simply would not be a good number 1. I do just want to point that out there right now. Like, he would also not be in the running for number 1 if it were up to me. And when we meet him, he is a solo crime-fighting vigilante. So even though he's left the academy, he's still crime-fighting. Very Batman-esque, except kind of worse. I do want to say right now, Diego is the love of my life. He is my favorite of the Hargreaves siblings. I can't really explain to you why. There's just something about him that appeals to me. He's also one of the hottest men that I've ever seen in my life. David Castaneda, who plays Diego, so egregiously attractive, it kind of pisses me off. Okay, so this is number 3, or Allison, and Allison has the ability of mental manipulation. I think that's what it's called. I don't know. She can basically control what people do, and she can kind of change reality to a slight extent if she says the phrase, "I heard a rumor," followed by what she wants. Is it a little goofy that she has to say a phrase every single time she wants to use her powers? Yes, it is. Does it kind of make her a liability? Absolutely, but the show's not going to address that, which is why I'm here. I'm going to address it. So even though she's number 3, Allison still maintains a pretty high position in the family simply because she's the only girl on the team, which is really unfortunate for her. She only has brothers. I'd kill myself. She typically aligns herself with Luther when it comes to everything, and this leads to some kind of weird preteen flirtation between the two of them. Is this a type of incest? Yes, absolutely. Listen, I'm gonna say something, and this isn't me defending incest. I do just want to, like, add some nuance to the conversation. I kind of understand their thinking because imagine being 13 years old, you are hormonal as hell, everything about you is changing, things simply are not going your way, you're emotional, you're confused, and the only kids your age that you have any interaction with, because I don't think I said this before, they don't leave the house except to go for missions. They're not going to school with regular kids, so the only kids that they are interacting with that are the same age as them are their siblings, and you are isolated from everyone else, and you live in such a shitty and abusive situation that when you find someone like-minded and when you find someone who is going through something similar to you, which is your siblings, you're gonna latch on to them. I'm not excusing incest, but for all intents and purposes, it makes sense that Allison and Luther would develop a mutual crush on each other just because there simply were no other options for this pivotal moment in a teenager's life. Like, again, it's weird because they're raised as brother and sister, but I get it, and I sympathize. So we're gonna move on. When we first meet Allison, she is at a movie premiere because she is a famous actress. She is wearing a gorgeous wine red strapless dress, and this is genuinely the best that she looks in the entire season. I don't know if the costume department hates the actress. I don't know if they hate the character. They cannot dress her. It's so bad. Every single outfit that they have her in is so fucking ugly. Cause what do you mean that one of the main characters is a celebrity and she doesn't know how to fucking dress? Girl, Jesus Christ. This is number 4. His name is Klaus. Klaus has the ability to commune with the dead, and you might think that this is a super cool power, except that it's actually not a super cool power. And I also think that you can understand why it's not a super cool power. When we meet Klaus, he is finishing a 30-day stint in rehab because Klaus is a drug addict. And also an alcoholic, but mainly we know that he's a drug addict. What drug is he addicted to? No clue. It's kind of just implied that he's addicted to any and all drugs, which slay. Actually not slay, but the reason why he's so addicted to so many drugs is because the drugs help mute the ghosts, and the ghosts are loud and annoying and they're constantly screaming at him, so obviously he does need to mute the ghosts. Like, yeah, if I had his power, I would also become a drug addict. He immediately leaves rehab and then goes buy more drugs, and then he overdoses. This is also implying that this is not the first time that he's overdosed, because once he is revived, he high-fives the EMT, which, do they know each other? He was the only one of the siblings that wasn't subscribed to the whole superhero agenda thing, simply because his powers are useless. He also doesn't like his powers, so he didn't really see a point in leveling up, if you will. He's the most blatantly queer-coded of the siblings. Also, Klaus is effectively homeless. They don't mention this, so we're gonna move on from that. Number 5. His power is spatial manipulation, which basically means that he can teleport at will. We don't know too much about him because when the siblings were 13, number 5 ran away, and then he never came back home, so it's just kind of presumed that he's missing or dead, and that's kind of all we know about 5. Okay, so this is number 6, or Ben. You're going to notice that this is also a child picture of a person. That's because a few years after 5 disappeared, so 5 disappeared when they were 13 years old, a few years after that, Ben dies. We don't know how he dies. We don't exactly know at what age Ben dies, but I think the leading theory is that they were 17, which is why I put 17 in my PowerPoint. If that's wrong, please don't comment. And he had the power of, his power was that he had an interdimensional portal in his stomach that housed a interdimensional tentacle monster. And I don't know if he could do it at will, I don't know if it was uncontrollable, but Ben could open the portal in his stomach and unleash the tentacle monster so that the tentacle monster can do the killing for him. I think that's what it is. I don't know. We're gonna move on because that's kind of all there is to say about Ben. Next person. So before I actually talk about this character, I'm just gonna clarify something. So this character is played by Elliot Page, who publicly came out as trans in 2021. So as a result of Elliot coming out as trans, his character also came out as trans in season 3. Yeah, it was season 3. And this happened because Elliot was like, I'm fine with still playing a woman, like I can do that, but then the showrunners were like, no, we're gonna respect you and we're going to have your character be trans as well. That's it. Okay, that's how I word things. So even though the character's transition arc is a part of their story, I'm not going to refer to them by his dead name, because that feels disrespectful. I'm also going to use he, him pronouns for the character. If you want to know the character's dead name, you can Google that if that's your prerogative. I simply won't tell you. His name is Victor, and he is number 7. He is the only one of the siblings without superpowers. Because he doesn't have any superpowers, he wasn't an official part of the Umbrella Academy. Like, obviously he still lived there and he still grew up with them, but when the Umbrella Academy was announced to the public, he wasn't a part of that. For all intents and purposes, the public only knew about 6 children, when in fact there were 7 children. So because of this, he was ostracized by his family, he was constantly left out of things, he was belittled by their father for not being special, he has no self-esteem to his name. So a few years prior to the events of season 1, Victor wrote a memoir called Extraordinary: My Life as Number 7, and this book not only revealed to the world of his existence, but it also acted as a sort of tell-all in which Victor unconsensually aired out all of the family's dirty laundry, and this leads to his siblings isolating him further. Okay, some other characters that we need to mention. This is Pogo. He's a monkey, and he talks. He's like if a human were a monkey, you know? And he dresses like an old-timey college professor. We are not given an explanation as to why Pogo is a talking monkey. He simply just is, and we have to accept that. Okay, and then this is Grace. She is the children's mother, except obviously she is not their biological mother. She is their adopted mother, but even then she's not really their adopted mother because she's a robot. She dresses exclusively like a 1950s housewife, which is kind of icky, but she looks really good in her 1950s garb, so I'll allow it. Okay, so episode 1 is We Only See Each Other at Weddings and Funerals, and we open in Russia, 1989. We are in a swim class in the Soviet Union, baby. Mainly focus on a teenage girl who is in the most god-awful highlighter yellow swimsuit. It's horrible. Her name is Tatiana. She is having some flirty vibes with this unnamed guy. They're kind of doing some flirty things. It doesn't really matter, except she kisses him on the cheek, I don't know, she kisses him on the cheek, she jumps into the pool, and then she's underwater for a concerning amount of time. But then suddenly blood starts appearing, so much blood, and she bursts out of the water, and she's suddenly 9 months pregnant. And then she's giving birth. And she gives birth on the side of the pool, and it's horrific, and it's awful, and it's so bad because she wasn't pregnant when she jumped into the water, and this sucks. And then we move in time to 2019, and this is when we get all of the intros that I told you already. I put all the intros at the very beginning of the episode because the way that the episode lays out their intros, I couldn't for the life of me figure out how to fucking write the script for this episode because I couldn't get past the intros. Like, it's a really cool scene. So it's a montage of all of our of our 4 siblings and also Victor. And Victor is playing the Phantom of the Opera on his violin. By the way, Victor plays the violin. I don't think I mentioned that in his introduction. But anyways, we meet all of them, and then they all individually find out that their father, Reginald Hargreaves, is dead. So R.I.P. Reginald. Also, I just populated the rest of the flowchart, so you're welcome. Once they find out that Reginald is dead, they all convene at the academy for his funeral. Allison tries to be a good sister to Victor while wearing the most god-awful outfit I've ever seen in my life. Diego's an asshole to Victor because that's just kind of Diego's prerogative. We see Luther, and he's kind of just going around Reginald's room looking for clues because Luther doesn't think that Reginald died on his own. He thinks that somebody killed him, and his reasoning for why he thinks that someone murdered Reginald is because his monocle is missing. If you remember from the Reginald picture that I had blasted on the wall, Reggie was wearing a monocle. It's like his signature look, and the monocle is missing, and now Luther is taking that as evidence that somebody killed him. Diego doesn't think that someone killed Reginald because he broke into the coroner's office and stole the autopsy report, which said that he died of heart failure. Awesome. And then we get a flashback to when the siblings are 13. A majority of the flashbacks that we're getting are from the time that the siblings are 13 years old. They're usually before 5 disappears, so 5 is still present with them. And the whole point of this is to just show, not tell, that Reginald is a negligent and ignorant father. That's kind of the whole point of that flashback. My boy Klaus is scouring through Reginald's office looking for cash because if you remember, he's a drug addict and he's also homeless, so he doesn't have any money, but he also needs drugs. This is a lose-lose situation for my king. Allison finds him, Luther finds him, and then this is when we find out that Allison right here is in her divorce era. Her husband, Patrick, filed for divorce from Allison 8 months ago, and Patrick is also trying to gain sole custody of their daughter, Claire. We don't know the reason yet. We'll find out soon, but we do know that has something to do with Allison's powers because Allison tells Luther that she is no longer using her powers, that it only leads to bad things, and this is where Allison kind of loses me. Again, we are only 10 minutes into the first episode. Allison kind of loses me because what do you mean? You have the power to get whatever you want, and at the ripe old age of 29 years old, you are now learning that there are consequences to your actions. What the fuck? Anyways, so then all of our remaining siblings, Sans, Five, and Ben, because they're gone and missing and dead, they all convene in the living room of the academy, and they're all discussing plans for the funeral, because apparently there have not been any plans for this funeral thus far. We learn that Luther was Reginald's #1 favorite child. Favorite is a strong word. Klaus at this point has also changed outfits. Klaus at any given moment will have 5 outfit changes within an episode, and I love it, and you have to accept it. He's an icon, he's a legend, he is the most fashion forward of the siblings despite literally being homeless, and I love that for him. Luther up here brings up the topic of Dad's potential murder, and he essentially, in not as many words, accuses the siblings present of murdering Dad, and he reasons that only someone with a grudge would have killed Reginald, and every single person in that room had a grudge against Reginald, so it must be one of them who killed him. They do not like this, they are not happy at being accused of their father's death, and they all leave, but not before Luther kind of demands that Klaus summon Reginald's spirit so that they can interrogate him, I guess. And then we get another flashback. We are at the Capital West Bank. There are armed men and there are hostages, and it is a very bad situation. And then suddenly the Umbrella Academy appears in their first public appearance, and this scene goes crazy. We're in the bank, the robbers are robbering, they're holding the hostages, whatever. It's scary, it's crazy, it's bad. 3, I'm going to refer to the teenage versions by their numbers, sorry. 3 just kind of strolls in, and then rumors one of the armed men, and she says, I heard a rumor that you shot your friend in the foot. Awesome. 1 literally falls through a roof on purpose and just kind of body slams a guy. Like, that's how he takes him out. He falls through the roof, body slams a guy, and then he throws, I think, a different guy through a window. It's awesome. He's giving the Incredible Hulk, but like a 13-year-old boy. 2 runs in and he throws a knife, and as he's throwing the knife, he says, guns are for sissies, real men throw knives, which is an awful sentence to say, but he really tried, so go off, King, I guess. And then number 5, right here, he pops in behind the armed guy with his teleportation powers, and he essentially starts beating him up, because these are incredibly violent children. And then we get the introduction of 6, who has to go into the bank vault because there are more armed robbers in there, and he has to use his creepy interdimensional tentacle monster powers to kill the guys, except 6 is reluctant to do this because his powers suck. This is their debut into superhero society. It's in this flashback that we also see number 7 being isolated from the rest of his siblings because he doesn't have any powers. Back in the present day timeline, Klaus is trying to summon the ghost of Reginald. Obviously, he can't do this because he's not sober. And then after this scene, we immediately get the iconic scene of all of the siblings dancing to I Think We're Alone Now by Tiffany. They're not dancing together. They're all dancing in separate rooms, but it's iconic. But then their dance party is interrupted by a blue lightning magnet storm suddenly bursting onto the scene. And so they go outside into the backyard courtyard or whatever, and they can see this kind of like old guy figure trying to push himself through the vortex. Klaus throws a fire extinguisher into the vortex because he's quirky and different. We also get Luther and Allison holding hands because if you remember, they have something flirty going on. So the old man in the vortex is pushing through the vortex, and then he suddenly morphs into number 5, 13-year-old number 5, and then he falls through the vortex and it's 5. He's alive! He's alive, bitch! And then I can move the slide. Boom! Number 5. We also get confirmation that the date of the funeral is March 24th, 2019. Just keep that in your mind. Just remember that. It's March 24th, 2019. Fabulous. 5 tells the rest of his siblings that he did succeed in time traveling to the future, but it was super shit. What you need to know is that 5 was in the future. He was stuck in the future for 45 years. So he was 13 years old when he got to the future. He was there for 45 years, which means that mentally he is 58 years old, but physically he is 13 years old because he fucked up his calculations and somehow managed to put his 58-year-old conscience into his 13-year-old body. So this is what he looks like. He's 13 years old. I want you to remember this. I want you to picture this. I want you to keep this in your mind. And I want you to remember that no matter what the actor looks like in subsequent seasons, the character canonically for seasons 1, 2, and 3 is physically 13 years old. I want you to remember this, okay? Because a lot of people tend to forget this, and it leads to disastrous things that I don't like. And then they have the funeral in the courtyard where 5 reappeared. It is now pouring rain. It's miserable. Grace has no idea what the fuck is going on. She's kind of losing it, but this is not really important. We have bigger fish to fry. Everyone but Diego has an umbrella. Why he doesn't have an umbrella? No clue. He looks sexy either way. Pogo gives a eulogy, and the eulogy is very much giving, oh, well, he might have been abusive to you, but he was really good to me. Diego objects, and he's like, no, he was an asshole and he was a monster, and also he didn't give us names. Like, my legal name is number 2. And we're not even going to get into the logistics of that because we simply don't have time to do that. Diego and Luther get into a fight because obviously they get into a fight. It ends with Luther being pushed into Ben's statue, because I never mentioned this, but Ben has a memorial statue because he's dead. Statue falls, the head of the statue comes off. Diego throws one of his knives at Luther and it slices through Luther's overcoat because he's wearing like a huge trench coat or whatever, and Luther freaks out. He gets cut, he slams his hand over his arm, and then he runs back into the house. He's freaked out. And then we get another flashback. This is simply a series of kind of connected scenes of these 6 siblings trained together, being a team, and then Victor being left out. One of the scenes is of these 6 getting tattoos, matching tattoos, because apparently to be a team you need matching tattoos, and Victor doesn't get a tattoo, but he still draws like the umbrella symbol on his wrist, because they get it on their wrist, by the way. It's awful. We also see that Reginald watches them on CCTV monitors, and he also monitors their brainwaves using like the sticky pads or whatever. I don't know what they're called, but he puts like the sticky pads on their temples and he's able to like monitor their brainwaves, and he's monitoring all of the children. So that's something important to note. Just keep that in your mind for now, okay? Okay. Anyway, so after the disastrous funeral service, Victor leaves the house because everyone's been telling him all day that he doesn't belong there. Allison tries to stop 5 from hijacking one of the family cars to go get coffee, because something about 5 that you need to know, he loves coffee. He loves coffee, he needs coffee, it's beautiful, it's great, it's fantastic. There's no coffee in the house, so 5 hijacks a car and drives to get some coffee, even though he's 13 years old. Diego also leaves because he needs to go out vigilanteing, and Klaus hitches a ride because, again, Klaus is effectively homeless, and he doesn't have a car, he can't drive, and he needs to get from point A to point B, so he hitches a ride with Diego. And then 5 ends up at Gritty's donut shop at the same time as another man who is from Ishmael's towing company, the server named Agnes. Agnes kind of just assumes that 5 and the Ishmael's towing guy are father and son. They get their stuff, the Ishmael's towing guy leaves, 5 stays to drink his coffee, and while he's there, some agents with rifles, machine guns, or whatever, I don't really know what they're holding, they come into the donut shop. 5 makes some like weird vague talk about like, oh, I thought I would have more time before you found me, and then he proceeds to murder all of them. Then we go over to the pier. Diego is standing at the edge of the pier and he is holding Reginald's monocle, and he is looking at it and he's sort of brooding over it. Then he drops it into the pier, so maybe Diego is the one that actually killed Reginald. Who knows? He hears on the radio that there has been an attack at Gritty's donut shop. This is also when we find out that Ben, he's dead. He's still dead, but he is haunting Klaus. He and Klaus, they're like this. They're like buddies. So Ben's ghost is kind of just hanging out with Klaus, and it's very fun. Diego and Klaus and Ben leave the pier, and then we go over to Victor's apartment, and Victor finds 5 who has blood on him. It's not his blood, don't worry about it, but he has blood on him, and 5 is just kind of sitting in the dark, and this is when 5 tells Victor that the world is going to end in 8 days, and that they have to stop it. Okay, so episode 2, Run Boy Run, starts with a flashback. The children are 13 years old, and this is when Five runs away. Five and Reginald get into an argument over breakfast about Five wanting to time travel. Five is like, I'm ready, I've been practicing my spatial jumps, like I can do it. Reginald is like, you simply don't know what you're talking about, you can't do it. Five is like, screw you. He runs away, and then he manages to do it successfully twice. And then he's like, great, I can do it. I know what I'm doing. I'm fucking awesome. So then he time travels for a third time, and he ends up in the apocalypse. And the world around him is burnt. There are flames everywhere. Everything is in rubble. Everything is in shambles. There is not a single person alive with him. He is the only living person in this apocalypse. And he tries to go back to the academy. Obviously, it's also been destroyed because it's the apocalypse. And he's actually all alone. And he finds out, oh no, he can't time travel back. He's stuck there. So Five tells Victor all of this in Victor's apartment, and Victor is trying to be understanding, trying to be helpful. Obviously, he doesn't really believe Five because it's kind of an outlandish thing to say. It's kind of a weird thing to hear. Victor offers Five his couch to sleep on for the night and then promises that they'll talk about it more in the morning. Five obviously doesn't stay. He leaves the apartment, but before he leaves the apartment, he takes out of his pocket a prosthetic glass eye, and this is the lead that Five is going to be following for the next 5 episodes or something like that. So then we leave Victor's apartment, and then we go to a motel where we meet Hazel and Cha-Cha, and Hazel and Cha-Cha are a pair of assassins, and they have been tasked with assassinating Five. But we do learn that Five used to work at the same agency that Hazel and Cha-Cha are employed at, so we can assume that it has something to do with the fact that Five left the agency. So back at Gridley's, it's post Five killing a bunch of people. Detective Patch and Beeman, I think he's also a detective, I don't know, but Detective Patch and Beeman are on the case, they're on the scene, they're looking around, they're trying to do their fucking job. Patch talks to Agnes about what happened, and Agnes tells Patch everything that she knows. You know, that Five came in and the Ishmael towing guy was there too. She still thinks that they're father and son, so that's what she tells Patch. When the Ishmael towing guy left Gritty's Donuts, she assumed that Five went along with him because, again, they're presumably father and son. So when the gunshot happened, it was like guys just came in, shot up the place, and then killed themselves, killed each other. And then Agnes kind of spills the beans that she already told all of this information to the other detective, and the other detective is Diego, because Diego, believe it or not, used to go to the police academy, but then he was kicked out for some unknown reason, but he still kind of likes to meddle in police business. He and Patch have a romantic history. They used to date. Obviously, they no longer date anymore. Patch arrests Diego, and then while they're doing this, we see that Hazel and Cha-Cha are also at the scene of the crime, and they're just kind of watching, they're kind of lurking, they're kind of just taking everything in. Back at the academy, Allison and Luther are still there. They have another heart-to-heart. Allison tells Luther about her daughter Claire, and how Luther is Claire's favorite superhero. It's kind of not important, except for the fact that it pushes along the Allison and Luther are in love agenda. Do want to say that Luther is still convinced that someone murdered Reginald, and then Allison tells him that he's trying to turn Dad's death into a mission, and that is no bueno. Also, while this is happening, Pogo tells Klaus, in not so many words, he kind of hints at it, that he knows that Klaus stole a ornate box from Reginald's office, because if you recall, Klaus was going through Reginald's office for stuff to pawn off, and then Luther told him to drop everything, and then Klaus did, except he didn't drop everything. He still had one thing stuffed in his pants, and he went off to go pawn that off for money so that he could buy some drugs. And then Klaus is like, oh yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about, but if I do find it, I'll put it back. And then Pogo tells him that the contents of that box are extremely important, and that if it got into the hands of somebody else, things would go very, very badly. And this definitely isn't foreshadowing for what's about to happen. Five finds the place where the glass eye that he was holding was manufactured. He threatens the guy who is in charge of the place. The place is called Meritech. He threatens the guy, he is kicked out of the place, he needs a new plan. Diego is at the police station because he was held in custody overnight, except that he's homies with all of the guys at the station. Beeman tells Patch that they analyzed the fingerprints on one of the knives at the crime scene. The fingerprints on the knife matches an unsolved cold case from 1938. Now we know that this knife was last held by Five, so somehow Five's fingerprints match an unsolved cold case from 1938. Diego and Patch kind of have a heart-to-heart, and then she kind of reads him for filth and tells him that the reason that he does vigilante crime fighting at night is because he's trying to prove that everything that he went through as a kid wasn't for nothing. So now Luther is at a boxing gym. It is Al's boxing gym, and he's looking for Diego, and this is when Luther finds out that Diego lives in the boiler room of the boxing gym, and he gets to live in the boiler room in exchange for occasionally mopping the floor of the boxing gym, except apparently he's really bad at doing that. That's his day job, except he doesn't show up for work sometimes. Victor goes back to the academy because he's looking for Five, and Five lies through his fucking teeth that everything's fine and that he's given up on, the apocalypse, that he realizes that Victor was right, that it's crazy that he's even thinking about it, and he's lying through his fucking teeth because he wants Victor to get off his back. And once Victor leaves, Klaus comes out of the closet dressed in the most god-awful shirt imaginable. Klaus and Five has struck a deal because Klaus is supposed to pretend to be Five's dad in order to convince the Meritech guy to give Five the information that he wants about the eyeball that he has been keeping with him since the apocalypse. Hazel and Cha-Cha have found Ishmael's towing, and they found the Ishmael's towing guy, and now they are holding him hostage. They also think that Ishmael is Five, because I never mentioned this before. I'm really bad at this. I'm so sorry. When they were tasked with killing Five, they were given a picture of old man Five, like physically 58-year-old Five. So they're looking for an old man, and they think that this old man is Ishmael, except they use a little bit of critical thinking, and they compare the picture that they have to Ishmael. I'm just going to call him Ishmael. I don't actually know his name, but the Ishmael's towing guy, and they realize that they simply do not have the right guy. So then they're like, tell us about the boy that you're with. Ishmael tells them, I don't know anything about that boy. I've never met him before, but he did say something really weird about visiting Gritty's with his siblings when he was younger. Except that's really weird because Five looks like a 13-year-old boy. So then with this information, Hazel and Cha-Cha put two and two together, and they're like, oh my god, that little boy is Five. So back at the academy, we listen in on Allison having a phone call with Patrick. Victor overhears this, and Victor tries to be sympathetic. Allison is simply not having it. She's kind of an asshole about it. She's like, honestly, Victor, if I wanted advice from anyone, you would be the last person I'd go to because you don't know anything about loving someone or having a relationship with someone because you push everyone away. And then Victor retaliates, it's not my fault. Dad separated me from all of you. And then Allison throws back, did Dad force you to write that book too? Which is true. And then Allison tells Victor that it's time that Victor grows up and accept responsibility for his actions, which is really rich coming from Allison, who is now facing a divorce and the loss of her child because she never took responsibility for her own actions. Pot meets kettle, babe. Like, look in the mirror first, At Meritech, Five and Klaus are having a meeting with the Meritech guy, and the Meritech guy basically tells them that he cannot give them the information about the eyeball without the client's express consent. They get into a whole argument. It's not really working out in their favor until Klaus stages an assault scene where he basically slaps Five in the face, and then he slams a snow globe into his head, and then when the Meritech guy tries to call for security, Klaus intercepts the phone and is like, there's been an attack in Mr. Big's office, we need help now. And this is a good plan, except for the fact that they're having this meeting in a glass office. All of the walls are glass, and I don't know if it's like one-way glass, I don't know if it's like, see-through on both ends. It's a glass office. Anyone could have seen this happen, and they would have known that Five and Klaus set him up. But regardless, it works. Meritech guy is looking through the files, looking for the eye. Uh-oh, that eye hasn't been bought yet. In fact, the eye that 5 has hasn't even been manufactured yet. So now we're at a dead end. 5 doesn't believe the Meritech guy. 5 thinks that something is shady going on with the Meritech guy and that the eye is still important to the apocalypse. While this is also happening and while 5 is deciding that he's going to stalk the Meritech guy, Klaus speculates that the reason 5 is so uptight and overworked is because he's horny, which is a weird thing to say to your brother who's physically 13, but then 5 reveals that he has been married to a woman named Dolores for the past 30 years or so. So 5 has been married. He is in a long-term committed relationship with the love of his life, Dolores. This is beautiful and I love this. At Victor's house, Victor, along with being a violinist for the local orchestra. I don't even think I said that earlier. I'm so sorry. Victor is 3rd chair violin for the orchestra. He also teaches private violin lessons for extra income, and he meets his newest student, which is a guy named Leonard. Leonard is simply just a nice guy. He's affable, he's inoffensive, he's pretty much unobtrusive, and that's who Leonard is. Diego gets home from presumably being in jail. I'm pretty sure he went straight from the police department to his house in the boxing gym. And then he discovers that Luther is in his boiler room apartment. Why is Luther in the boiler room? Well, he was there because he was trying to look for evidence to pin Reginald's murder on Diego. Does Luther have any reason to believe that Diego murdered Reginald? Not really, except for like the lifelong grudge that they have between the two of them because Luther's number 1 and Diego's number 2. We find out that Diego couldn't have killed Reginald because he was actively fighting in a boxing match the same night that Reginald died. Does this really make any sense? Because on the night Reginald died, Diego was off vigilante crime fighting, but then he was also at a boxing match. Do I understand the continuity of the show? No. Do I think that the show understands their own continuity? Not really. Anyways, back at Victor's house, Leonard is being very flirty. Victor's not really that receptive because Victor's never really been flirted at before and he's never really flirted, so he doesn't really know what's going on, but obviously they're both kind of into each other. They bond over not having very easy and seamless relationships with their family. Leonard is kind of the only person in his family left. His father died a few years ago, and then Leonard invites Victor to his woodworking shop. Back at the academy, Allison is stewing over not being able to see her daughter. She's doing this by smoking in the attic because she's a smoker. And then Pogo, in an effort to cheer her up, takes her to the command room, the control center. I don't really know, but it's one of those rooms with like a million little TVs, and this is where all of the CCTV footage is. Like, they kept all of the footage, and Pogo is like, there are boxes of it in here. If you want to watch them, you can. And it's weird. It's just footage of them as children. It's kind of gross. It's kind of creepy. It's through watching these videos that Allison realizes how shitty they treated Victor as a child. And then Allison's like, if someone ever treated Claire like this, I would be so mad. And it's like, girl, I know that parenthood can change people's perspectives of life, but the lack of empathy that Allison consistently displays throughout this season pisses me the fuck off. Okay, I get it. You have the power to get whatever you want, and you are being raised by a megalomaniac, abusive bitch. How do you not have any empathy? How do you not have any self-awareness for your actions? Allison immediately finds a tape that is apart from the other tapes, and then she watches it and she sees something really, really bad at Gimbel Brothers, the department store. 5 sneaks in. Remember, it's the middle of the night, the store's closed. He sneaks in and he steals a mannequin, and this mannequin is Dolores. Dolores is a mannequin, and he's been married to Dolores for 30 years, and I think that's beautiful. Hazel and Cha-Cha arrive, and they shoot up the place because they're trying to kill 5. Because there is now another crime scene at Gimbel Brothers, Patch gets a call and is like, hey, there's a crime scene at Gimbel Brothers, but she gets this call while she's at Ishmael's towing company, and she finds that Ishmael's dead. So RIP to Ishmael. He's not on the board, but he's very dead. And then she gets the call about Gimbel Brothers, and she's like, okay, I gotta go. But then because Diego is also just like a vigilante who is on the police department radio channel, he also gets this notification that there's been a crime scene at Gimbel Brothers, and this is, I think, the only time that we see him not in his tactical gear. He's literally just in a black tank top, but it's so fucking hot. And it's so good, and we never get to see it again. Then over at the academy, while, Diego's off to go to Gimbel Brothers to mess up the crime scene that Patch is surely gonna get mad at him about, Luther admits to Allison that he was wrong about somebody killing Dad, but then Allison is like, no, you were actually right about killing Dad because, I've got evidence. And then we get a flashback to Five's time in the apocalypse, because Five comes back to the academy as Luther and Allison are having this conversation, and he's covered in blood because, remember, he was shot up at Gimbel Brothers, so he's kind of not okay. And he has a bit of a flashback to the apocalypse. He is alone again. It is the moment that we left off at the beginning of the episode where he's just realizing that he's in the apocalypse and he's stuck. He finds a body holding up the glass prosthetic eye that he's been carrying around and is using as his only lead to stop the apocalypse. He takes the eye out of the person's hand, and the person that he takes the eye from is Luther. Luther, dead. Dead in a ditch. I'm not gonna put an X over Luther just because he's actually still alive, but just know, in the apocalypse, Luther died. He finds Diego's dead body, not good, tries shaking Diego awake, doesn't work because he's dead. He finds Allison's dead body, and then he finds Klaus's dead body. And I'm assuming that finding Klaus is when Five realizes that these are his dead siblings, because Klaus's umbrella tattoo is the only one that's visible. Do I actually know if he recognizes his adult siblings? No, I actually don't know. I'm assuming yeah, because even though they have different actors for the adults and for the kids, if we just kind of ignore the fact that they're different actors and we just look holistically, oh yeah, that's my 13-year-old brother's adult face. Yeah, I told you, But anyways, episode 3, Extraordinary, begins with another flashback, but instead of to the childhood, this flashback occurs 5 years ago, so it occurs in 2014, and in this flashback, we see Victor buying a typewriter and writing their memoir, Extraordinary, My Life as Number 7. They publish it, it's an immediate hit, everyone is gobbling it up, it's oh my god, we haven't had any more news about the Umbrella Academy in fucking ages, oh my god, the drama, the spoilers, oh my god. While everyone else in the world is super ecstatic about this book coming out, the rest of the siblings are obviously not okay with this. We get a little montage of the rest of the siblings reading the book. Luther's reading it while doing push-ups. Allison is reading it while she's getting her makeup done in a makeup trailer. Diego's not even reading the book. He ripped the author photo from the back cover of the book and he taped it to a punching bag and he's punching it. And he is shirtless and he looks so hot. And I do want to say, and this has no relevance to the plot or even Diego's character whatsoever, but I think at this point in life, in 2019 or 2018, whenever they filmed. I think they filmed it in 2018. But in 2018, David Castañeda, who plays Diego, had a nipple piercing at this time. And he had a nipple piercing while he was playing Diego, at least for season 1. And I know this because I've seen behind the scenes photos of this scene where Diego is punching the punching bag and he has a nipple piercing. And this is not important, but it's important for me and I need everyone to know this. It's so hot. So that was the past, but now in the present day, Victor, despite the success of his book, is still kind of living an unremarkable life. He's late for orchestra practice, he is third chair, he's been at the same orchestra for a while now, and he has not moved on from third chair. He wants to be first chair, but first chair is taken by a woman named Helen Cho. Helen Cho is very good, and she basically tells Victor that he can try as much as he wants. He can practice as much as he wants, but he's not going to get any better. And maybe that just means that he's simply not good at what he does, which is kind of harsh, but maybe true. Back at the academy, we see CCTV footage of Grace, killing Reginald. Or maybe not even killing Reginald, but she's kind of just standing there while Reginald is actively convulsing and having a heart attack. So Allison and Luther are watching this footage and they're like, oh my god, Grace killed Reginald, and they're trying to like be sly about it. They're watching her a little bit, you know, she's making the breakfast, they're asking her questions, she's being very suspicious, and it's very obvious that she's hiding something, but the two of them don't really know how to go about this situation. Diego and Patch are at the crime scene, but in a turn of events, surprisingly, Patch asks for Diego's help because she's like, maybe you know something about this. Maybe you have a lead that you can get through your illegal vigilante ways that I can't get through my very legal, very official police department ways, you know? Back at the academy, outside of the academy in like the alleyway, Klaus is digging through the dumpster looking for the stuff that was in the box. Obviously he cannot find it because he threw the stuff into the dumpster like 2 days ago. Five climbs down the fire escape and he hijacks a van. It's not their van. Like, the Hargreaves have cars because Reginald was a billionaire. They don't have vans. Five just steals a van and he stalks the Meritech building. He talks to Dolores because that's kind of how he coped while in the apocalypse. And this is how they were married, by the way. Remember, Dolores is his wife. So Five is stalking the Meritech building, and the rest of the siblings, which is Luther, Diego, Allison, Klaus, and Victor, are arguing about whether or not Grace killed Reginald. Allison and Luther are very much in the camp that Grace killed Reginald, and they suggest that they shut down Grace. Because remember, she's a robot, so they're like, we need to turn her off, like she's very clearly malfunctioning. Diego, because he's a mama's boy, I never mentioned this before, I'm not mentioning anything, Jesus Christ. Diego's a mama's boy, but not in the way where he like lets his mom control his life. He's very much just like cares about his mom and wants her to be happy. But Diego defends Grace because he has empathy, and he's like, no, she's our mom. Why would we fucking do that? Diego, Victor, and Klaus are anti-shutting down Grace. And then I think Luther, Allison, and Ben? I think Ben is pro-shutting down Grace. I don't know if Ben is actually pro-shutting down Grace or if he's just being antagonistic towards Klaus. Allison and Luther have another heart-to-heart because all they ever do is have heart-to-hearts, and they talk about Allison's divorce, and she tells Luther about how she has to go through mandatory therapy so she can have visitation rights, and the reason that she has to do this and why she's even in this situation in the first place is because she used her powers on Claire and Patrick caught her. Allison laments that she's been using her powers to get what she wants all her life, and she kind of reasons that any parent with her power would do the exact same thing. Victor heads over to Bricktown to go visit Leonard. They continue their flirting. Victor is now responding very well to the flirting. Leonard gives Victor a hand-carved figurine of Victor playing the violin that apparently Leonard made last night, and I think this is a little weird, but Victor is very touched by this, and they make plans to go out for lunch, I think. No, they make plans to go out for dinner, but before they can actually solidify the plans, Allison shows up because Allison just kind of knows where Victor is or whatever. Leonard recognizes Allison because, again, she's an actress, but also he's like, oh, you were part of that Umbrella Academy, right? And then, you know, that creates an awkward tension because Victor wasn't part of the Umbrella Academy, and Leonard kind of recognizes this, and he was like, wait a minute, but you weren't part of it. And then Victor's like, yeah, well, you know, I was kind of like the fifth Beatle of the family, and then Leonard is like, well, personally, I wasn't really a Beatles guy, I was more of a Rolling Stones guy myself, and that's really disgusting to me, but Victor eats this up, just immediately head over heels in love. Allison asks Victor to come home because they're having yet another family meeting about Grace. I feel like I wrote my notes wrong because this isn't really making sense, but I don't really care anymore. Five is still staking out the Meritech building. He's still sitting in his stolen van, and then a group of kids playing ball or whatever run past. They're happy, they're children, they're carefree. Five has a panic attack flashback of his times in the apocalypse. Luther and Klaus find Five. How they found him, not really sure, but they find him anyways. Luther tries to tell Five to come back to the academy so that they could have a meeting about Grace. 5 is like, this simply isn't important, like, you go ahead, but I don't really give a shit about what's going on. At Gritty's, because Gritty's is open again, Hazel falls in love with Agnes. It's very cute. At the academy, Luther shows all of the assembled siblings, so it's everyone but 5. He shows the assembled siblings the CCTV footage of the night Reginald died and Grace was standing over his body, and then Diego points out that Grace took Reginald's monocle to clean it. Luther is like, then where's the monocle? Like, I've looked everywhere. Diego admits that he took the monocle from Grace after the funeral because he knew that Luther would lose his shit if he found the monocle on Grace, and that he would immediately assume that Grace was the one that murdered Reginald, like he's doing now. Oh, why did I type my notes up like this? This is super weird. Back at Gritty's, you know how Hazel and Agnes are falling in love? Yeah, so Hazel and Cha-Cha are actually at Gritty's because they want to ask Agnes questions about 5, and she tells them 5 has the same Umbrella Academy tattoo that the rest of the siblings sans Victor have. So now they have a lead on where to find 5. Okay, back to the fucking academy. I've fucked up my notes somehow and I don't really know how. Jesus Christ. Okay, back at the academy, they're still arguing about Grace. Somebody brings up a point that Grace was specifically programmed to be a caretaker and a protector and to intervene if someone's life was in jeopardy. Obviously, as we've seen in the CCTV footage, Grace did not intervene when Reginald was dying, so they come to the conclusion that Grace's hardware is malfunctioning, that she's getting old, whatever. Something happened. Luther suggests that they shut Grace off. They have an argument or whatever. Diego is like actively freaking out about the idea of Grace being shut down because, again, that's his mom and Diego's a mama's boy. Diego finds out that Grace heard everything, but then when he asks her about it, she's like, oh no, I didn't hear anything. What were you guys talking about? Are you guys okay? You know, obviously something's going on with her. Victor talks to Diego, gets a little bit philosophical, and Victor's like, do you ever wonder if everything that she feels and everything that she does is simply an extension of Reginald, because Reginald was the one that made her, you know, she is a product of him. And then Diego is like, that may have been true once, but she's evolved and she's different now. And then we get a flashback to when they are 13. This is post 5 leaving, but they're still 13. They are preparing for a mission. It's a scene where we just kind of see Grace being an excellent mother to all of the children. She's very caring, she's very sweet, she's very understanding and helpful, but she's especially has kind of a stronger relationship with Diego because as a child, Diego had a stutter. Grace helps him with his stutter. She coaches him through it. She tells him to picture the word in his mind, and then he's able to say what he wants to say without stuttering, and she's very proud of him, and he's very happy that he has someone who can help him and support him, because obviously Reginald, who is watching from the doorway, is very disapproving of this. I'm pretty sure Reginald is ableist. I don't think he'd be thrilled to find out that one of the children he bought has a stutter. So anyways, Diego is thinking about this because obviously Victor's philosophical conversation kind of got him thinking. It got the gears to start in his brain. So he tries to have a conversation with Grace, and he tries to get her to admit that she's unhappy and that she hates Reginald, but because she was programmed to be Reginald's pseudo-wife, I don't even know what her relationship with Reginald is, but like, Reginald built her. Obviously she's not going to discredit him or down talk him in any way. This is also when we find out that Reginald is an Olympic gold medalist. What he competed in the Olympics for? No clue, but he's an Olympic gold medalist. A little bit later, still at the academy, Hazel and Cha-Cha break into the academy because, if you didn't know, the mansion city block just has the Umbrella logo emblazoned everywhere. Like, the marketing team is going off the rails, and I commend them, really, but it makes it really easy for assassins to find them. So Hazel and Cha-Cha break into the academy, and then an all-out fight occurs between Hazel and Cha-Cha versus Luther, Diego, and Allison. Klaus is in the academy, but he is currently taking a bath, and he has headphones on, so he cannot hear anything. And Victor is also at the academy, but Victor has no training and Victor has no powers, so Victor is kind of useless, and it ends with Cha-Cha dropping a chandelier onto Luther, and it's one of those, like, heavy industrial chandeliers, so, like, With any other person, they're dead. Luther gets right back up. And this is when it's revealed that Luther has a monkey body. Luther has a big hairy monkey body, and the monkey body only affects his torso. So we have like shoulders, arms, down to his waist, I think. I'm assuming his legs are still human legs. His head is obviously still a human head, but the rest of him is monkey body. Once Luther gets out of the chandelier and he realizes, like, oh no, my cover is blown, like everyone knows that I have a monkey body now, he flees the scene. Hazel and Cha-Cha have also left the academy, like they run away because they realize, like, oh, we are losing and we are going to die if we stay here. Diego goes to check on Grace and he finds out that Grace simply didn't know that any of that was happening. Like, she didn't register that people had broken into the house and had tried to kill them. So I guess, like, in an act of mercy, Diego shuts Grace down and frames it as Hazel and Cha-Cha killed her. And he's crying the entire time, and it's very sad. Victor goes to Leonard's house. How he knew where Leonard lived, I have no clue. He's like, I had nowhere else to go, so I guess he spends the night or whatever. Hazel and Cha-Cha reconvene back at their motel, and this is where we discover that Hazel took Klaus hostage. Episode 4 is titled Man on the Moon. We open with a flashback, and this is pre-monkey body Luther. About 7 years ago, it's 2012, so he is 23 years old. He is the only one still left at the academy. It's a very lonely existence. He gets sent on a mission alone. It is not a good mission. He comes back, he is burnt to a crisp. He's still alive, but barely. And the only way that they can save him is by injecting a serum into his bloodstream and just kind of hoping that works. And it does work, obviously. I mean, they try to do like the usual paddle resuscitation stuff, you know, the things that you're supposed to do in like a medical field. That doesn't work. So then they go over to the serum, right? They stick the serum in him, he's fine, he stabilizes, he wakes up, and he's hairy, and he has a monkey body now. Because, uh-oh, that serum had Pogo's blood in it. So now he has monkey blood and monkey body. In the present, in 2019, Allison and Luther, the next morning after the whole debacle with Hazel and Cha-Cha, they discover that Grace has been killed. Luther doesn't really show any remorse, probably because he has other things to worry about, like his monkey body. They don't know that Diego's the one that killed Grace, and I don't have a thing. Just pretend like there's a red thing over here, okay? But just know that Grace is dead. I forgot to, god damn it. And then Allison tries to talk to Luther about his monkey body, but he's very clearly traumatized about this, so he shuts her down. He also doesn't think that he deserves help, which is really sad, but then they kind of don't discuss it anymore. Leonard tells Victor that he doesn't have to apologize just for existing, because Victor apologizes a lot. That's just something that people with anxiety do, you know? Just kind of like general mental illness. You kind of apologize for your existence a lot. Totally get it. Victor is very like head over heels, kind of in love with Leonard already. He's just kind of very happy that there is someone in his life who is willing to listen to him and willing to be nice to him without some sort of transaction, you know? Like, Leonard is just a nice guy, and Victor likes that. Hazel and Cha-Cha are torturing Klaus, except that every torture method that they're doing turns Klaus on because he's a kinky little bastard. They try waterboarding him, except they don't do it right because the cloth that they have doesn't even cover his mouth. It only covers like his eyes and his nose, but it doesn't cover his mouth, and that's like not the point. That simply renders the waterboarding effective. And like, again, I want to clarify, I've never waterboarded anyone, and I've never been waterboarded, but I'm pretty sure you're supposed to cover all orifices of the face for an effective waterboarding, you know? So they've been torturing Klaus for hours and they haven't gotten anything, which kind of tells me that they're kind of bad at their jobs, but whatever. At Eudora's house, Diego's just kind of lying on the porch, waiting for Eudora because he's sad and depressed about Grace being dead because he killed Grace, but he can't really tell anyone about it. But Diego tells her that he's there for an update on the Gritty's case, but then Eudora obviously sees through his bluff, she sees through his lies, so he tells her that his mom died last night, Grace, dead as a ditch, dead as a doornail, dead in a ditch, dead as a doornail. God damn it. Grace is dead, and that Hazel and Cha-Cha broke into his house last night looking for his brother Five, and that Five has been missing since yesterday. and that Hazel and Cha-Cha tried to kill his family. I do want to note that Diego never says Five's name. He only says they were looking for my brother, and my brother has been missing since yesterday. He doesn't say which brother, and I want you to remember, he has 1, 2, 3, 4 brothers. At this point in the timeline of the show, they don't know that Victor is a brother. They're still calling Victor by his dead name, but effectively 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 brothers, okay? No, actually 5, if we count the dead one too. So then we leave Eudora's house, and then we go over to Victor's apartment, and Allison is at Victor's apartment, and she's wearing the most god-awful outfit I've ever seen in my entire life. She is wearing a cobalt blue bodycon dress. It's either a dress or a skirt. Either way, it's not good. And she's wearing a turquoise leather jacket over this, as well as stiletto heels. And I'm begging her to just wear sneakers. Please wear sneakers. Jesus Christ, I have hiccups now. Oh my god. So she goes over to Victor's apartment because she wants to talk to Victor, but then the door is kind of propped open. She goes inside. There's very, very clearly someone inside of Victor's apartment. That's not Victor. Turns out it's just Leonard, and Leonard was returning Victor's keys because Victor left his keys at Leonard's place last night. Kind of awkward, but then he gives Allison the keys and then splits, and Allison is still a little suspicious, but you know what? She's kind of got to move on. So back at the Meritech building, Five sees the Meritech guy doing some really shady things with some people in kind of shady cars. So he threatens the Meritech guy at knife point, and he tells Five that he makes prosthetics for fake patients, and then he sells them on the black market, and that the eyeball has probably already been bought under the table off the black market, but he doesn't know who bought it, so this is essentially still kind of pointless. Like this, yeah, Five got some answers, but it doesn't really help him in his quest to stop the apocalypse. At the academy, Luther is snooping through Five's room because he's looking for Five, and then Diego's also looking for Five, so then they get into an argument. So then they go off to go look for Five. And then at the motel, Klaus is actively coming down from his high, because if you remember, Klaus is a drug addict, and he's been kidnapped and tortured for the past, I don't know, 12 hours or something like that without a hit. So he is coming down. He's going to start going through withdrawals soon, and we know that he's coming down from his high because ghosts are starting to appear in the room. Obviously, they're only seen by Klaus and Ben. Hazel and Cha-Cha cannot see these ghosts, but ghosts are starting to appear again. And it is at this point that Hazel and Cha-Cha have the brilliant idea of figuring out who Klaus is in order to better effectively torture him. And I feel like, again, you guys are professional assassins. You should have done this first. This should have been the first thing you've done. They go through his coat, which again is the first thing they should have done, and they find all of Klaus's drugs, and they also find weed chocolate, and they proceed to eat all of the weed chocolate. This is very upsetting to Klaus because he's actively going through withdrawal, so he tells them about how Five is at Meritech. He's trying to figure out who the owner of the eyeball is because he wants to stop the apocalypse. So Hazel and Cha-Cha go to Meritech. They are high as fuck, and they burn the place down. And then the place explodes just as Five is getting there. So that's a dead end. He can't use that as a lead anymore. Meritech, eyeball, gone. That lead is done. While this is happening, while the place is being blown up, and while Five is witnessing Meritech being blown up, Diego and Luther find Five's van, and it is empty. There's no Five in there anymore, there's no Dolores. But they do find Five's copy of Extraordinary because he found a perfectly intact copy of it in the apocalypse, and it has like all of his notes and his equations and his scribbles, and they figure out that Five is going to be at the library. He's going to be at the Argyle Public Library, except he's actually not, because he's actually in front of Meritech watching it get blown up. But then also the van that Luther and Diego are at is also parked in front of Meritech. Like I said, the continuity of the show doesn't really make any sense. I don't even think that they know what's going on, but whatever. They have a lot of ground to cover, and they're doing the best that they can, and I'm doing the best that I can to recap it for you. Oh my god, my throat hurts. Jesus Christ. Allison finds Victor, gives Victor his keys. That doesn't really matter. Anyways, at Gritty's, Hazel and Cha-Cha are coming down from their insane high, and they're finally able to process that the world is ending, and they deduce that 5 is trying to change the timeline in order to prevent the apocalypse. And this means that killing 5 would ensure that the end of the world occurs. So they have to kill 5, except Hazel is now very anti killing 5. I mean, Hazel's always kind of been anti doing the job because he's very like socialist, communist, like fuck the man, you know what I mean? Okay, we get a flashback of little baby number 4 trapped in a mausoleum with a million ghosts screaming in his face, and he's terrified, and it's really upsetting. And then we go back to the motel, and Klaus is tied up in the motel room closet. He's got tape over his mouth. He's like in the worst of the withdrawal period now. And he's having flashbacks to this traumatic time where he was locked in a mausoleum for hours at a time. There's a cleaning lady in the room, but she's vacuuming, and she also has headphones on, so she cannot hear Klaus screaming, and this is really bad. Then Ben has a speech about how Klaus has been taking life for granted, and that it sucks being dead and being unable to change. And like, I get the sentiment. I don't think this is the best time to have this talk, but whatever. So back at Meritech, Patch and Beeman are on the case. They're at the scene of the 3rd crime scene this week. They find one of the floppy ears from Cha-Cha's mask, because I didn't say this before, but Hazel and Cha-Cha wear these like really creepy kids masks when they're doing crime so that people can't see their faces. One of the ears got burnt off of Cha-Cha's mask, and now it's evidence at the crime scene. And then Patch also finds 5's van, and it's covered in ash, and there's a message written in the ash on the windshield that says, "Your brother says hi." So she connects the dots, because remember, Diego told her that his brother has been missing since yesterday, so she puts two and together. She's like, oh my god, this is Diego's missing brother, except that they're gonna find out really soon that this is not the brother that Diego's talking about. But again, this is what you get when you do not clarify which of your 5 brothers you're talking about. Diego and Luther find 5 at the library, but before they actually find him, they have a little bit of a chat. They have a little bit of a heart-to-heart, and Diego's like, do you know why I left the academy at 17? And Luther's like, because you're an asshole. And Diego's like, because that's what you do when you're 17. And I don't think so, because you're a minor, and when you're a minor, you're not really allowed to do anything without parental permission, especially in the eyes of the law, but whatever, I'm going to keep going. And then Diego kind of beats Luther, not like verbally beats Luther for, you know, never growing up and never becoming his own person, because Luther, you know, before going to the moon was still at the academy, so he's never had to get a job, he's never had to pay bills, and then Diego accuses Luther of still being a virgin, which he is. So everyone knew that Luther and Allison were doing some weird incestuous flirty thing. No one stopped it, but they all knew. Okay, and then they find 5 in the library. He is passed out, he is drunk as fuck, he's got like an almost empty bottle of vodka with him. Dolores is with him too. It's awesome. Where he got this bottle of vodka, I don't know, because if you remember, he's physically 13, so he cannot be sold alcohol. Victor and Allison are at a bar. They're having sibling bonding, whatever. They're talking about Leonard. Allison is like, you've only known him for 3 days. He's a little suspicious. But Victor's like, no, but like, he's nice to me. Also, this is the second confirmation that we get that everyone knew about Allison and Luther's flirty thing. Okay, so back at the motel, Hazel and Cha-Cha have returned to torturing and interrogating Klaus. But then Klaus, because he is no longer high, or he's actively in withdrawal, he's able to see ghosts again. The room is filled with ghosts that have been brutally murdered. And Ben convinces Klaus to start talking to the ghosts to like get some intel on Hazel and Cha-Cha. So Klaus kind of holds a convention of sorts, a meeting of sorts with all of the victims of Hazel and Cha-Cha. They tell him all about the ways in which Hazel and Cha-Cha murdered them. Klaus reveals, because he learned this from one of the ghosts, that Hazel lied to Cha-Cha about killing a victim. Like, Hazel claimed that he killed someone when in actuality she escaped, the person escaped, and he lied about this. So now Hazel and Cha-Cha are on the outs. The rift between them is wider. While this is happening, Patch arrives at the motel, and she calls Diego at the boxing gym to be like, hey, I know where your brother is, meet me at the motel, I need some backup, you know? So after waiting for like 15 minutes, Patch decides to go investigate by herself. She finds Klaus in the motel room because he is banging his head against the table because he's duct taped and he's tied to a chair, so he can't really speak or move. So he's banging his head against the table. She frees him. He crawls away through an air duct. She is like, please put your hands up, I'm going to arrest you, whatever. Hazel comes out, drops his gun, but then Cha-Cha shoots Patch from behind, killing her instantly. So Patch, dead. Dead. But you know what? You know what? Klaus gets away. And you want to know what else? Klaus got away with a briefcase. I never mentioned this earlier, but Hazel and Cha-Cha came with a briefcase, and this briefcase was super duper important. There was a whole thing where Hazel was putting the briefcase into the vent, and Cha-Cha was like, it's protocol that we have to carry that around with us, but they don't. So Klaus, in his escape, snatches the briefcase. This is super bad. Anyways, while this is all happening, Luther and Diego are carrying Five back to Diego's apartment, and they update him on the whole debacle with Hazel and Cha-Cha and how they attacked the house the day before, the episode before. And this is kind of when Five inadvertently reveals, he's very drunk by the way, so he has no idea what he's saying, but he reveals that he has killed a lot of people, and then he passes out. It's super awesome. But then when they get back to the boxing gym, Al tells Diego that he got a call from Patch telling him to meet her at the motel and that she needs backup. So Diego goes to the motel to give Patch backup, but when he gets there, she's already dead. He's crying and he's upset, but then police cars come, like you can see the lights of the police cars, and he's like, I need to go, I can't be, he tells her corpse, I need to go, I can't be here when they come. And it's like, it's a really nice sentiment, but like, babe, your fingerprints are all over the crime scene now. You're not wearing gloves. Where are your gloves? Meanwhile, while Diego is finding Patch's dead body, Klaus is on the bus. He has the briefcase with him, and he tries to open the briefcase because, again, Klaus is going through insane withdrawal. He needs his drugs. He's a drug addict, so he tries to open the briefcase looking for something to pawn, or maybe there's money in it, but then there's a blue lightning zap, and then Klaus is gone. And that's the end of episode 4. Okay, so episode 5 is called Number 5. We start with a flashback to the apocalypse, and we kind of just see snippets, a montage of Five living it up in the apocalypse with Dolores. Then when Five is an old man, he's like in his mid-50s, he's truly middle-aged. When old man Five is in the apocalypse, he meets the handler, who, like Grace, is dressed exclusively in cunty 1950s get-ups, except that her outfits are darker in color than Grace because she's evil. The handler tells Five that she is part of an organization called the Commission that is tasked with the preservation of the time continuum through manipulation and removals. She offers Five a way to get out of the apocalypse in exchange for his employment at the Commission for 5 years of service. And then she also reveals that the Commission has been watching him just suffering in the apocalypse for years. But then he's like, wait a minute, does that mean that the apocalypse is a fixed point in time? And yeah, the apocalypse is supposed to happen. It is a fixed point in the timeline, so it's supposed to happen. It cannot be changed. So Five joins the Commission because he does not want to be in the apocalypse anymore. They turn him into the perfect assassin. I know that in the comics, this entails like bodily modifying him so that he contains the DNA of the world's of history's most notorious serial killers. The show doesn't go into depth about how exactly they turn him into the perfect assassin, but he does become the perfect assassin, and we get this insane montage of adult Five standing in front of a green screen showing black and white footage of various world leaders getting assassinated, including including John F. Kennedy, and we see that 5 was in Dallas when Kennedy was killed, and he was tasked to kill Kennedy. But he doesn't actually kill Kennedy because 5 has been planning to escape the commission and go back to his family to stop the apocalypse the entire time he's been employed with them. So instead of actually killing Kennedy, he breaks his contract, and then we see, from 5's point of view, the scene from episode 1 where 5 returns to 2029 to be with his family, but it's all from 5's perspective, okay? We get that scene again. 5 in the present timeline is telling all of this to Luther. He's telling him about the apocalypse. He's telling him about how he found all of their bodies. He tells Luther that he took the eye from dead Luther's hand because dead Luther in Apocalypse timeline had apparently ripped the eye out of the perpetrator's skull, which is super cool. And then at this point, Diego comes back. It's post finding out that Eudora is dead. He's very upset. He tries to attack 5 because he's upset and he doesn't know how to regulate his emotions. And then 5 tells Diego and Luther about the Handler and the Commission, and how the Commission sent Hazel and Cha-Cha to kill 5, and that everyone that gets in their way is simply collateral, which doesn't make Diego feel any better, and he feels so bad that he swears vengeance upon Hazel and Cha-Cha, and then he leaves. Klaus zaps back onto the bus. It's now daytime. Instead of being in a bloody bath towel or whatever, Klaus is now covered in dirt. He is wearing an army fatigue jacket with the sleeves ripped off, and he is very, very clearly shell-shocked as he now has new trauma. Do we know what the trauma is? No, we do not, but we get a scene of Klaus destroying the briefcase in a fit of grief and rage, and it is set to the song Mary by Big Thief, and this is cinema. So Victor goes on a breakfast date with Leonard. They're meeting at a coffee shop. Victor has stopped taking his medication cold turkey because he ran out, but apparently he feels better than he has in years, which I don't really think should be the case because Victor has been on these pills since he was a child. There is no way that he should be going off of these pills cold turkey without feeling some sort of adverse effects. He should be going through insane withdrawal right now, but he's not. He feels perfectly fine, and then he tells Leonard that the orchestra is holding auditions for first chair because the first chair violinist, Helen Cho, just suddenly went missing. Like, she didn't show up for rehearsal. No one knows where she is, so they're holding first chair because there's going to be a concert in like 3 days. Back at the academy, Klaus is taking a bath. He's taking yet another bath. He's still looking a little bit traumatized, shell-shocked. And then we kind of hear helicopter blades and gunfire and shouting because now he has a new kind of PTSD, and this PTSD involves war. And there's also someone involved named Dave. 5 checks in on Klaus because the bathroom is simply covered with blood, and 5 immediately recognizes that Klaus time traveled. Apparently there are symptoms to time travel: jet lag, full body itch, cotton brain, shit like that. Klaus tells 5 that he was gone for 10 months. And 5 is so happy that Klaus time traveled because that means that he used a briefcase to time travel, and he can use the briefcase to stop the apocalypse, except, if you remember correctly, Klaus destroyed the briefcase. 5 is pissed about this, but he writes a note to Hazel and Cha-Cha anyways, claiming to have the briefcase even though he doesn't have the briefcase. Meanwhile, Pogo is fixing Grace. This is a monkey in STEM. Okay. At the library, Allison is looking up information about Leonard on one of those old-timey computers, you know the ones, and then Cha-Cha is, at the same time, in the same library, is looking up information about the Hargreaves. Both of their research sessions are going very well. Allison ends up finding Leonard's address. It's beautiful. At the academy, Klaus hitches a ride with Diego because, again, Klaus can't drive, and he's also effectively homeless and broke. He's very silent. This is very unlike Klaus. Diego notes the last time Klaus was this quiet was when they were 12, and Klaus had his jaw wired shut after tripping down the stairs in Grace's heels. Awesome. Klaus has Diego stop at a veterans bar, and Klaus goes into the veterans bar and he stares longingly at a framed photo and says, "Hey, Dave." We don't get to see the photo yet, but he's looking at the photo and he starts experiencing PTSD flashbacks again. There's one veteran that gets really pissed that Klaus and Diego are there. I get it because it's a veterans bar, but also they're not doing anything. Like, they're not causing a ruckus, they're not demanding attention, they're not doing anything. Klaus is kind of just like looking at a picture, and Diego is kind of like being emotionally constipated and just like silently supporting, you know? It also kind of implies that there are no more wars happening, because the vet guy is like, this is a veterans only bar and you guys are clearly not veterans. So it's like, okay, so is the Afghanistan war, did that not happen? Is there just no more US military? I don't really know what's going on, but whatever. Diego beats up a few of the vet guys in Klaus's honor, and then they leave, and as they're leaving we get a close-up of the photo that Klaus was looking at, and it is a photo of Klaus and this guy who is Dave. And they are in war. I mean, they're not in war in the picture, like, it's very clear. You know what I mean, okay? They're army guys. This is an army guy. So after this bar fight, Klaus and Diego debrief in the car, and Klaus is being super evasive, but Diego is like, man, I just watched you have a mental breakdown in a veterans bar. Please just tell me what's going on. And Klaus tells Diego that he lost someone that he loved, and then Diego goes, well, at least you have the power to summon their ghost, which is kind of insensitive to say at that time, but go off, I guess, King. Also, at this time, Diego catches Hazel being romantic with Agnes outside of Gritty, and if you remember, Diego now has a vendetta against Hazel and Cha-Cha. Okay. At the academy, Luther and Five team up, but the only way that this happens is because Luther threatens to throw Dolores out of the window if Five doesn't let him tag along on his mission. Five was doing equations on his wall, and he pinpointed like 3 people that could be the reason the world ends, and Luther's like, okay, what are you gonna do with that? And then Five is like, well, I'm gonna kill them. And then Luther's like, no, don't fucking kill them. And then he threatens to throw Dolores out the window. Five has a gun, and then Luther is like, if you don't drop the gun and if you don't let me go with you, I'm gonna drop Dolores. Except it wouldn't have done anything because Five's window is the fire escape. Like, the fire escape is on Five's window. She would have dropped at most 2 inches. She would have been fine, truthfully, but whatever. This is a big deal because Luther was threatening Five's wife. At Victor's house, Allison tells Victor about how there is simply no record of Leonard Peabody anywhere, and that this is a reason why Victor should break up with Leonard, but then Victor takes offense to this and is like, Allison, shut the fuck up. You don't trust me. Can you just trust that I, like, know what I'm doing? Also, why would I go to you for advice on relationships? You're actively getting a divorce right now, and that's fair. Okay, so at the motel, we are at a new motel now. Diego places a tracker underneath Hazel and Cha-Cha's car, and then they kind of stake out in Diego's car. By they, I mean Diego and Klaus, and Ben is also there as well. They stake out in Diego's car, but then Hazel and Cha-Cha see this, and they're like, okay, now we gotta kill this guy. So they shoot at Diego and Klaus. When they're driving away, they shoot at Diego and Klaus. Diego gets very shot in the arm, and Diego's car, very shot up, cannot drive anymore, so they steal an ice cream truck, and they follow Hazel and Cha-Cha. Victor is auditioning for first chair violin, because if you remember, first chair is open at the orchestra. The audition is going fine, but then suddenly magical sound waves emanate from Victor's violin, so something is definitely happening, but then it kind of hypnotizes the conductor, and it kind of enthralls them, so something's going on with Victor, and we're gonna move on from that. Allison breaks into Leonard's house and snoops around, but she doesn't find anything because Leonard comes home, so that was pointless. In the middle of nowhere, Five tells Luther that he never really enjoyed killing. It was just kind of a part of his job. And then they go to meet Hazel and Cha-Cha. They have a fake briefcase because they don't have the real briefcase that they want. And they're willing to trade the briefcase with Hazel and Cha-Cha in exchange for a chat with the handler, because Five needs to talk to the handler, except before that they can actually finish this transaction, Klaus and Diego and Ben come soaring in the fucking ice cream truck. The ice cream truck hits the ice cream truck hits Hazel and Klaus the ice cream truck that Klaus is driving, Diego's in the passenger seat, it hits Hazel and Cha-Cha at full force, but before anyone can fucking die, time freezes. And then suddenly the handler appears, and she arrives to speak with Five, because that's what he wanted, you know? He wants the handler to stop the apocalypse, he pulls a gun on her, and then she, in return, offers him a new position at the commission in management. So before he was an assassin, now he can be in a higher tier of the commission and be in management now, okay? So she offers him this job. She's very weird about it. She caresses his cheek. I want you to remind you that he's physically 13. This is weird. I no longer really like her. I liked her at first because she was cunty, and she was just like unapologetically evil and fun, and that was cool. But now she's caressing his cheek, and that's weird, and now I don't like her anymore. Because Five wants his family to survive, like the whole point is that he wants to save his family, he strikes the deal with her, and they disappear. Time unfreezes, Hazel and Cha-Cha get hit by the ice cream truck, Luther, Diego, Klaus, and Ben escape in the regular car that Luther and Five took, and then they drive back to the house. Hazel and Cha-Cha find out that it was a fake briefcase. They're pissed about it. Victor arrives at Leonard's house, announces that he got first chair. They're very happy about this. They have congratulatory sex. They kiss for the first time, and then they have sex, but we don't watch them have sex, thank fucking God. The camera just kind of pans away, but then we see the same magical sound waves that were in the auditorium when Victor was auditioning for first chair. We see the same sound waves, and they go up to the attic of Leonard's house, and we see Helen Cho's body wrapped in a tarp. That's in Leonard's attic. So Leonard killed her. So she's dead. Sorry, Helen, you're not on the board, but you're dead. These sound waves leave Leonard's house, and they go all the way to the academy, where Pogo has fixed Grace. So Grace is alive again, by the way, but then Pogo tells Grace, do you remember what happened? And she's like, yes. And then he's like, it's important that the children never know. You cannot tell them everything. You cannot tell them anything. And then Grace is like, I understand. She doesn't say anything. End of episode 5. Episode 6 is the day that wasn't. So episode 6 starts with a flashback. It is when Klaus first time travels, and he lands in the Ao Shau Valley, Vietnam, 1968, during the Vietnam War. So unfortunately for me, Vietnam War is real. It actually happened, and Klaus participated in it. That's not very cool. He lands in the middle of the night right in front of a shirtless Dave who was asleep. It's the middle of the night. They were asleep, but now there is an attack. There's like an air raid or whatever. I don't know. And now suddenly Klaus is part of the army, and he's, oh God, Klaus is part of the army, and he is now fighting in the war, even though he has no documentation. He's not in any of the registers or whatever, but whatever. I don't care. So Klaus joins the war, and then there's a very nice montage of Klaus and Dave and a few of their other comrades or whatever in a Vietnamese nightclub, and they're dancing the night away, and it's 1968 or whatever, and Dave and Klaus are falling in love, and they kiss, and it's beautiful, and it's great. As you can assume, Dave is dead. It's the Vietnam War. Dave is dead. I just realized I never put an X over him. Jesus Christ. But just know, Dave, very dead. So dead, man. In the present, Klaus is dumping all of his drugs down the toilet, which is super good because he wants to get sober, except that Luther ruins it and tells him that the world is ending in 3 days and he needs to get up because they are going to have a family meeting. So, it is Wednesday, 8:15 a.m. Luther, Diego, Allison, and Klaus are in the living room. They're having a discussion. Luther fills them in on the whole apocalypse situation. I don't think Five told them that the world was ending. I think only Victor knew that. And now Luther does. Anyways, Luther catches them all up to speed. He tells them that the apocalypse is coming and that they all died trying to stop it the first time. While this is happening, Hazel and Cha-Cha are at a new motel. They are informed that their contract to kill number 5 has been terminated because 5 has rejoined the commission, so they don't have to do that job anymore. But then Cha-Cha gets a new assignment, and the assignment is to kill Hazel. Oh no. At the commission, we see the commission. It is located in an indiscernible place. Everyone is kind of dressed like it's the 1950s. The show has a weird 1950s fetish, and I kind of have to move on from that. I don't really care. So 5 is no longer an assassin for hire. That's what he was doing when he was first employed. He is now in management, and that means that he keeps track of a single fixed point in time. He has to make sure that it occurs by dictating elimination. So if he thinks that someone could cause his fixed point event to not occur, he just kind of has to send a little message to be like, kill that person, and the person dies, and then theoretically, hypothetically, the event continues on. So 5 is tasked with overseeing the Hindenburg disaster. Super cool, we can move on, doesn't really fucking matter. Victor decides to take Leonard over to the academy because he wants Leonard to be there when he tells the family about the concert, because he wants to invite the family to his concert. It's very sweet, but then he finds out that the family, which is Luther, Diego, Allison, and Klaus, are having a family meeting without him. He gets very mad at this. He's like, you guys are always leaving me out of things. I'm so sick of it. Like, our entire lives has just been excluding me. He leaves. Luther thinks that the apocalypse has something to do with the moon, because if you recall, Luther was on the moon for 4 years. He was doing research up there, and there must have been something about his research and the moon and the apocalypse. They must be tied together. Diego says, I don't care about this. He wants to get revenge on Hazel and Cha-Cha for killing Patch, and if the world is ending in 3 days, then I gotta get a move on my revenge. Klaus also says that he doesn't care because he's going through withdrawal and he would like to see his dead beloved. And Allison says that she doesn't care because she needs to go back to California so that she can be with Claire. Outside of the academy, Victor is ranting to Leonard. He's very upset because they were having a family meeting without him, excluding him. Once again, it is pouring rain. Victor is yelling. They are walking in the middle of the street. Don't know why. There's a perfectly empty sidewalk next to you. And then as Victor is yelling, the lampposts that they are passing start to bend inward, kind of towards them or something. Leonard sees all of this, stops Victor, shows them the evidence. It's like, something's happening and you're making it happen. Victor's like, that's impossible. I don't have powers. That's fucking ridiculous. Suddenly stops raining. Victor's like, that's a coincidence. And Leonard's like, I don't think it is, but let's just move on. At the commission, 5 steals a file about the apocalypse. He takes it to the bathroom because he plans on reading it in the bathroom. But then the handler comes into the bathroom because it's gender neutral, apparently. She takes a piss. While she's taking a piss, she's talking to 5 the entire time. And then once she's done, she washes her hands. And then she peers over the bathroom stall door into his stall. And, like, we know he wasn't peeing because he was simply trying to read a file, sneaky. But she doesn't know that. So that's weird. Don't do that, you fucking weirdo. But the point of this visitation is to warn him away from doing anything dastardly, such as stealing files, which he already did. Hazel and Cha-Cha drive out into the forest, where Cha-Cha plans on killing Hazel. Obviously, this doesn't happen because Hazel's still alive. At the academy, Klaus has decided the only way he's able to get sober so that he can summon Dave is that if all of his choices are taken away from him, and the only way to take all of his choices away from him is to tie him up and render him immobile. Diego ties him up. Klaus reveals that Dave is a guy or whatever. I'm assuming that all of the siblings knew that Klaus was queer before this. Diego does assume that Klaus's dead beloved is a girl, so I don't really know anymore, but he's also very chill about the fact that Dave is actually a guy, so you know what, we love an ally. Luther, on the other side of the mansion, is tearing through Reginald's office bedroom. He's in a room, he's looking for all of the samples from the moon that he sent to Reginald, and Pogo tells him where it is. They are under floorboards. None of the packages that Luther sent down from the moon have been opened, meaning that Reginald never looked at them, and all of the work that Luther did on the moon and all of the time that he spent on the moon was for nothing. We get a flashback to teenage 1 and 3 being cutesy, having a little flirting session. They sneak out of the rooms in the middle of the night to go over to the rooftop greenhouse. There's a fort. They brought paraphernalia, there's soda, there's snacks. Luther brought an axe, don't really know why. And then Luther gives Allison a necklace. It is a heart-shaped, it's either a locket or a pendant, but it's heart-shaped and it has A+L engraved into it. I don't know where he got this locket. I don't know how he got it, because I'm assuming they don't get an allowance or whatever. Also, that must have been quite expensive. She puts it on, she promises to never take it off. Spoiler alert, she does take it off. Then they start dancing, but then Reginald catches them and tells them that fun and games are restricted to Saturdays from noon to past noon, which I think is kind of funny. Allison takes Luther up to the rooftop greenhouse and they try to reenact their preteen date, but that doesn't go very well because that fort that they built was made for children and they are adults now, so they decide to take their date outside of the house. Leonard is trying to convince Victor that he has powers. Obviously, Victor is not buying this because he's gone 29 years believing that he has no powers and that he's ordinary and not special. Cha-Cha finds out about Hazel's love affair with Agnes, and then we get a flashback to Klaus literally on the front lines, and he's right next to Dave, but then Dave is shot and he dies in Klaus's arms, and it's very, very sad. Diego finds out that Grace is up and running again, and he offers to take her out of the house to go on a walk at a park. So they go to a park, and then Grace tells Diego that she hasn't been completely honest and that there is something that she is hiding from them. We don't get to hear about what this is, because then we have to go over to Luther and Allison's date in the park. He asks her to dance, and then we get a weird sort of dream sequence. They are in different clothes. Luther no longer has a monkey body. They are dancing. There's choreography. It's very romantic. And then they kiss for real, and they make out, and they're like, oh my god, like, you know. Allison tells Luther that her entire life after she left the academy, she has compared every man that she was ever with to Luther, which is really weird, and then she invites him to California with her before the end of the world. I don't think he says yes. Actually, I don't really know what he says, because at the same time that this is happening, Victor is still at Leonard's house. Victor finds Reginald's notebook. It is a red leather-bound notebook with his initials RH embossed on the cover. He finds this notebook, and this notebook contains all of his notes on Victor's powers, meaning that Victor was kept sedated with his pills in order to keep his powers in check, because his powers are incredibly volatile and just destructive. Klaus summons Dave. It's very beautiful. It's very touching. Something is going down at the commission that is going to ruin everything that we've talked about in this episode. 5 discovers that there is an assignment to protect Harold Jenkins. He doesn't know who Harold Jenkins is, but he concludes that Harold Jenkins is the key to the apocalypse. He has something to do with the apocalypse. So he sends messages to Hazel and Cha-Cha telling them to exterminate each other, so that gets that conflict out of the way. The handler tries to kill 5 because 5 broke his contract again, and he's still trying to stop the apocalypse, even though the apocalypse is a fixed point in time that has to happen. She says that she saved him, and then 5 says that she ruined him. So we're not really gonna get into the implications of what that means. Presumably, it just kind of means that she turned him into a killer. It could also mean something weirder and grosser. I'm not gonna say it on the channel because I might get flagged. but it's unsavory and it's weird, and he accuses her of this, and then he throws a grenade at her and she blows up, and then he steals a briefcase, blows up the rest of the briefcases at the commission so that no one can come and get him, and then he time travels back in time so that everything we saw in that episode gets turned back, and then we are back at the academy Wednesday, 8:15 a.m. again. Five appears during the family debrief. He falls out of a time vortex very painfully, and he tells them that they need to band together to stop the apocalypse and find Harold Jenkins. Episode 7, The Day That Was. We get a flashback on October 1st, 1989. Harold Jenkins is born totally normal. He was the product of a regular pregnancy. He was conceived normally, except his mother dies in labor, and his father, as a result of his grief, becomes incredibly abusive to Harold. Harold is also insanely obsessed with the Umbrella Academy, as many people are. He has action figures, he has comic books, he has a costume, and he has aspirations to become a member of the Umbrella Academy, even though he has no powers and he is not part of the miraculous 43 children born of Immaculate Conception. Apparently, after every mission, the Umbrella Academy just kind of has hordes of adoring fans waiting outside of their house. Harold joins these fans as the Umbrella Academy are returning home. He jumps the barricade and tries to convince Reginald to let him join the Umbrella Academy. Reginald, in response, because he's a normal, sane man, ridicules Harold in front of everyone, calls him unspecial and powerless, and then he throws him off of his property. The entire crowd laughs, and then the Umbrella Academy come back outside because they were inside. They come back outside to pose on the front stoop, and it's like one of those fake Tumblr stories where everyone's like, yeah, this guy was like super homophobic to me, but then I like clapped back at him and I said something really smart and witty, and then everyone who was watching just started applauding me, and then they killed the guy. Harold returns back home to his abusive father. His father is being very abusive, and Harold has just decided that he's had enough, so he takes a hammer and he bludgeons his father to death, and he is put in prison for 12 years. And then we see the events of episode 1 occurring, specifically the scene where Klaus is pawning off the box with the fancy stuff that he stole. Harold Jenkins watches Klaus throw the stuff into the dumpster, and then once Klaus leaves, Harold climbs into the dumpster and steals the notebook that Victor found at the end of the last episode, the red notebook that belonged to Reginald, and we find out that Harold Jenkins is Leonard Peabody. So then we get some of the events of last episode from Harold's perspective, and he's actually not very nice. He's just a devious, manipulative motherfucker who has been manipulating Victor into awakening his powers kind of from the start. Back to the siblings. 5 is updating Luther, Diego, Allison, and Klaus on the apocalypse, and about his day at the commission. Luther's still on his moon bullshit, so he stays at the academy to go searching for evidence that the moon is involved with the apocalypse. Klaus stays as well because he wants to get sober so that he can see Dave. Diego, Allison, and 5 do some recon on Harold Jenkins. At the motel, Hazel gets the same message that Cha-Cha got. He is contracted with assassinating Cha-Cha. At the police department, Diego called Beeman up and was like, hey, I need to talk to you, but Beeman tells Diego that he's being looked at as the prime suspect for Patch's murder because, if you recall, his fingerprints were all over the crime scene. But Diego is like, I know, I didn't kill her, I know you believe me, I just need a file. It could save some lives. I can't tell you what's happening, but I need this file on a guy. So Beeman gives Diego the file. Diego returns with the file, and this is when Diego, Allison, 5 discover that Leonard Peabody is Harold Jenkins. So Luther gets absolutely plastered after learning that his time on the moon was a waste of time. Klaus tries to be nice and sympathetic about it, but then Luther chokes Klaus and holds him up against a wall, and then he throws him onto the floor. It's not very nice. And then Luther runs away because he wants to be like Klaus and he wants to be numbed, and so he goes in search of substances, and this is not very good. Diego, Allison, and 5 break into Leonard's house, and they go looking for evidence that Leonard is a psycho killer. They find in Leonard's attic a weird, fucked up shrine to the Umbrella Academy, and there's all these posters and figurines, and like their eyes are crossed out, and like the heads of their figurines are melted down. Harold's goal isn't to go after Victor, it's to get back at the Umbrella Academy, and Victor is sort of just the weapon, I suppose. Immediately after, 5 passes out because, he was shot when he was leaving the commission. So now, he's dying. That's great. He's 13. Jesus Christ. Harold takes to a remote cabin in the woods that apparently belonged to his grandmother. It's on a lake. It's pretty cool. How he's able to afford both a house and a lakeside cabin in this economy, I don't know. Also, because he's a woodworker. Also, how does he still have the house? Because his father was his only family, and he murdered his father. He shouldn't have that house. Anyways, the reason that Harold took Victor out to the cabin is because he wants to test Victor's powers. Very cool and manipulative of him. Hazel asks Agnes to run away with him because the end of the world is coming. He doesn't tell her about the end of the world, but he's like, please run away with me, I love you. And she agrees. She's like, yeah, let's go together. Klaus follows Luther to a club. Diego and Allison carry a bleeding 5 back to the academy. Luther has his full monkey body out, like he's wearing pants. He's shirtless. Monkey body out. He's dancing, he's high, he's probably drunk as well. He's having the time of his life, popping really vague pills and just dancing with rave girls that think he's a furry. It's really cool. At this time, Klaus is actively going through PTSD. The strobe lights and the noises kind of emulate war sounds, the helicopter, the gunshots. Klaus throws Luther's pill of drug away, but then he tries to relapse, but then when he reaches the pill, it's actually Dave's dead body. So he's actively having a PTSD flashback about his dead boyfriend's dead body that died in Vietnam War. That wasn't a sentence, but you get the point. Back at the academy, Allison says that she has to go to California to be with her daughter. This is the 7th time that she said this, and nothing has happened of it. Police cruisers show up, and they start arresting Diego because if you remember, Diego is wanted for Eudora's murder. So he's arrested. He looks insanely hot while this is happening. It's so good. While Diego's getting arrested, Allison splits and immediately goes looking for Victor. Allison, I think, starts driving towards the cabin. How Allison knows where the cabin is, I don't know. Hazel figures out that Cha-Cha was tasked with murdering him, so he sets a trap. He holds her hostage, and then he's like, we can be super chill about this. Like, I'm gonna leave. You can keep doing whatever you're gonna do, but I want to leave. I don't want to be a part of this anymore, so like, let's just be civil about this. Cha-Cha, because she works for the man, she's been pilled. She's like, if you leave, I'ma hunt you down, and I'ma kill you, and I'ma kill Agnes. So you better kill me if you don't want that to happen. Hazel, because he is a nice guy, does not do that. He just leaves and goes off with Agnes. Back at the rave, Klaus is about to take the drug when he sees the rave girl that Luther is dancing with. I think girl has a pimp, I think. I don't really know what his relationship to that woman is, but Klaus sees the pimp going after Luther because Luther stole his woman, I suppose, and Klaus jumps on the pimp's back, tries to save Luther, and then Klaus is immediately thrown to the ground, and then the screen goes black. When Klaus wakes up, everything is black and white. There's folksy accordion music playing. A little girl riding a bike approaches him. It's implied that she's God, and she tells him that he can't stay there because she doesn't like him, which is sick. Also, he's waiting for Klaus. That's what she says. He's waiting for you. Klaus thinks that this is Dave, obviously, so he goes running to a building that ends up being a barber shop, but psych, it's not Dave waiting for him, it's Reginald. Reginald tells Klaus that everything he put them through when they were children was for their own good, was because they were born to save the world, and then Klaus is like, but we were just kids, like, you shouldn't have done that to us because we were literally just kids. Then Reginald is like, you were never just kids, you were born to stop the apocalypse. meaning that he knew about the apocalypse and that he killed himself in order to get the gang back together. This is what he reveals to Klaus. And it's this point that he wakes up, he is revived from the dead, and Luther is gone. Awesome. Harold and Victor are at a random pub. They're leaving. There are these 3 drunk guys that are using Harold's car as a table. They start harassing Harold, and then they kind of sexually harass Victor too. It's really weird. Harold gets beat up by the 3 guys. Victor freaks out so much that his powers kind of explode outward from Victor's body, killing 2 of the men instantly. And then the ending montage that we get is Allison is driving to the cabin. Klaus and Ben are looking for Luther, who is making out with the rave girl. Diego's in jail. 5 is passed out, because remember, he got shot and passed out from blood loss. Victor's in the hospital with Harold. Harold is alive, and he lost an eye in the fight, so the eye that 5 had belonged to Harold. Okay, episode 8, I Heard a Rumor. I'm gonna try and go through these last 3 episodes so quickly because my voice shot. Jesus Christ. Okay, episode 8, I Heard a Rumor. This is a year ago. It's Allison with her daughter Claire. She is telling Claire a bedtime story. It's very cute. Claire asks for another story. Allison is like, no, it's time to go to bed. Claire is being a little bit pushy, so Allison rumors her to go to sleep. But Patrick saw this, and this is what caused the divorce. We go back to the present timeline. Allison is still driving to the cabin. It's raining. There's a bunch of voiceovers of teen Allison and adult Allison using her powers to get everything that she wants. So she got her career from her powers, she got her relationship, whatever, her entire life. She rumored Patrick into loving her, which is insane and really bad. And then the next scene is of Allison finding the cabin. How she found it, don't know. She goes snooping, doesn't find anything because Leonard and Victor are still at the hospital. Leonard has lost an eye. Luther lost his virginity to the rave girl. 5 is awake, he's up and running. Klaus tries to tell Luther and 5 that he talked to Dad and that Dad killed himself. He staged his death on purpose so that the band could get back together. Obviously, Luther and 5 don't believe this, but then Pogo comes in and he's like, yeah, that's actually true. Pogo also tells them that the CCTV footage that Allison found was planted there on purpose to further the murder mystery, because they were kind of hoping that the murder mystery would reignite their desire to come together as a team and save the world, which kind of backfired, but whatever. Allison sees the crime scene that Victor caused at the random pub. One of the small town cops recognizes her, obviously, because she's an actress, and then she used that to her advantage, and she fully lies to him, and she's like, yeah, I'm doing research for a new role where I'm a small cop, and I was wondering if I could tag along with you for a little bit so that I could, get a feel for what it's like to be a small town cop, day to day, whatever. So she tags along with him. At the police department, Beeman helps Diego escape custody because they're homies, and Beeman knows that Diego didn't kill Eudora. Awesome. We get a flashback to when 7 was 4 years old or something. He is practicing his powers with Reginald, and they're very destructive, and it doesn't really work. And at some point, Victor just kind of decides to stop listening to Reginald because he's truthfully 4 years old. Reginald's not very happy about this because this causes pain and destruction and chaos, and he doesn't like this. And also, it just goes to show that Victor is uncontrollable, and Reginald wants all of the children to be under his thumb and under his control. Leonard uses the notes in Reginald's notebook to teach Victor about how to use his powers, how to control his powers. It works pretty well. Victor's kind of a natural at this. They matter. The only thing that really matters about this is that Victor has enhanced hearing and he has a connection to sound waves, and his abilities are kind of directly tied to his emotions. Post being released from jail, Diego goes back to the academy, declares that Allison is in danger and that they all need to go. So Diego, Luther, Klaus, 5, and Ben as well go find Allison at the cabin. They just kind of go. The rest of their action for this episode is they're just kind of driving. Cha-Cha, who has escaped captivity that Hazel put her in, goes to Gritty's and finds out that Gritty's has been closed because apparently Agnes was the sole owner of Gritty's, and she closed down the shop so that she could run away with Hazel. And this is kind of fucked up because Agnes, you had employees that depended on their job at your donut shop for financial stability, and then you just close without like notice. What the fuck? That's kind of fucked up. Also, why did you close it down? Why didn't you just pass it along to someone else? That probably takes a lot of paperwork and time. But regardless, it's still fucked up, and Cha-Cha is pissed about this because, like, now she has to go find Hazel and Agnes. So she goes inside of Gritty's. She very easily finds their destinations because Agnes just kind of left a map, destined locations circled. But then Cha-Cha blows up Gritty's. It's blown up, it's gone. At the hospital, Allison and the sheriff police guy are interrogating the third drunk guy that was harassing Harold and Victor. Allison immediately blows her cover on this. She gets a little bit too pushy with asking questions, but they find out that Harold hired the three guys to create a situation in which Victor would be forced to use his powers, but the guys got a little bit too drunk and started harassing Victor as well, which was not part of the contract. While this is happening, Victor is left alone at the cabin. He starts experiencing some new old PTSD. This is previously unknown PTSD, obviously, because he didn't remember that he had powers. And he only calms down by playing his violin, but then he kind of like hears Harold's voice giving him advice, and then we cut over to a flashback of Reginald taking 5-year-old Victor down to a secret underground bunker where they lock Victor away for an undetermined amount of time. This is awesome and super, super something that you should be doing to your child. Great, no notes there. Okay, in the present, Victor is still playing his violin. His powers are going a little bit haywire, but it's kind of like in control haywire. Like, they're kind of just responding to Victor playing his violin, and the emotions that he is pushing down through playing his violin. Allison appears. She sees the magical wind happening. She still doesn't connect this to Victor, because again, none of the siblings know that Victors have powers at this moment. Allison tries to tell Victor that Leonard is Harold Jenkins, and that he's a murderer and an overall bad guy. She tells Victor that she has the police report in the car, which, like, why wouldn't you bring the police report inside with you to make your case? That's stupid as fuck. Victor doesn't believe any of this. He tells Allison that he loves Harold, that Harold is the only guy that has ever loved him and cared about him and listened to him. And Victor is, like, clearly very overwhelmed by this news because it's coming on top of all of the other overwhelming things that have happened to him in the past, like, 3 days, and it's awful, and they're talking about this, and Victor tells Allison that, like, oh, the wind that's happening, yeah, those are my powers, because I have powers. And then Allison suddenly remembers something, and we get a flashback to 4-year-old number 7 still, like, locked away in the private bunker, but then Reginald brings in 4-year-old number 3. This was also the same time that Victor started being drugged, like, started being sedated with his pills, so that's awesome. But Reginald brings in 4-year-old number 3, and he tells number 3 to rumor 7 into believing that he is ordinary. So number 3 says, I heard a rumor you think you're just ordinary. And that's the reason why Victor didn't know he had powers before he went off his meds. That was why, like, I guess no one else knew he had powers, but I feel like someone would have a memory of Victor having powers unless Allison rumored the rest of them too. Also, Allison, she says explicitly that she didn't forget this memory, she just didn't understand it, and I'm like, I feel like it's kind of self-explanatory. Like, you're rumoring your sibling, your unpowered, untrained sibling, into thinking that they're ordinary. I think it's obvious, you know? I think you're just a little bit dumb. But whatever. I just have a lot of problems with Allison. So obviously Victor gets very upset about this. The fight between them kind of veers into, like, I have to be the best girl in the house territory, which is misogynistic, and weird. We don't really have time to unpack all of that. Victor summons his powers to scare Allison. Allison is obviously very scared. She gets emotional. Victor is not responding well to the emotion. So Allison starts rumoring Victor, but then Victor takes his violin bow and slashes Allison across the throat. So Allison is bleeding out. Her throat has been slit. Harold comes in at this moment, pulls Victor away from Allison's bleeding body. Luther, Diego, Klaus, and Five and Ben arrive at the cabin. They go into the cabin and they discover Allison's body. Allison actively bleeding out. Rather than immediately taking her to the hospital, Luther just kind of cries over her for a while. And it's like, guys, we need to get her out of here because she's bleeding from her neck. So then episode 9 changes. We open with a flashback of 4-year-old number 7 murdering a bunch of nannies because he won't eat oatmeal. He refuses to eat the oatmeal. And this is when Grace first appears in their lives. Grace was originally built to be their nanny. 7 tries murdering Grace, but instead of dying, Grace just kind of gets up again. And it's really creepy because her head is twisted backwards. And it's really creepy. 4-year-old Victor eats the oatmeal and everything's fine. And I guess we just needed that flashback to see that Victor is incredibly violent with his powers. Okay. At Harold's house, Harold is bathing Victor, washing away all the blood, and he's trying to convince Victor that his family is going to come after him and they're going to try and get rid of him because he killed Allison. We don't have confirmation that Allison's dead yet, but Harold's like, your family hates you and they're scared of you, and Victor's like, no, but they're my family. Harold's just being a pushy and manipulative bitch, and that's kind of his prerogative. Allison is somehow still alive. They've taken her back to the academy. Surely she should be dead by now. Canonically, it takes hours to get to the cabin. She should be dead right now. She needs a blood transfer. They are in the infirmary at the academy. She needs a blood transfer. Luther can't give blood because he has monkey blood. Klaus can't give blood because he is a drug addict. Five doesn't even, I don't even think Five offers. But Diego offers, and because Diego has a fear of needles, this is when we learn that he has a fear of needles, he immediately passes out, and then they take blood from him, which is awesome. Klaus is in his room. After this, Klaus goes back to his room, tries to relapse, because, hey, the world is ending, and life is shit. Let's do some drugs. Ben is very upset by this. Klaus is like, Dave's dead. I can't summon him. There's no point. So Klaus puts the pills in his mouth, and then Ben, who's so upset about this because he does not want his brother to relapse, punches Klaus in the face. Now this is important because if you remember, Ben's dead. And Ben doesn't have a corporeal form, which means Ben shouldn't be able to punch Klaus, except he did. So now, something's going on with Klaus's powers. Also, Diego thinks that Harold was the one that tried to kill Allison. The boys still don't know that Victor has powers. So Diego tries to stage a rescue mission for Victor, which is awesome. At Leonard's house, Victor is trying to process the new trauma that occurred. He's in the kitchen of Leonard's house. He accidentally knocks over Leonard's bag, and in the bag is Reginald's notebook, and then kind of puts 2 and 2 together and figures out that Harold has been manipulating him this whole time. Harold tries to gaslight Victor. He tries telling Victor, like, I'm protecting you, I'm the only one that cares about you, your family's afraid of you, they don't trust you, whatever. When that doesn't work, when Victor isn't being very receptive to that, Harold tries to go a different route by basically channeling Reginald Hargreaves and verbally abusing Victor. Victor gets so mad that he kind of uses his powers to create sort of a tornado in Leonard's house. Harold is lifted into the air like there's something like holding him up, and then the pointy end of every sharp thing in Harold's house gets like stabbed into him. He gets turned into a pincushion. He's done and dead. Boom. Dead as a ditch. Dead as a doornail. I can't say that right. Jesus Christ. At the motel, Cha-Cha takes Agnes hostage because Hazel's not there. I didn't say that earlier. Diego, Five, and Klaus discover Harold's dead body, which is awesome. They also find out that the eye that Five has been holding on to belongs to Harold Jenkins. They still don't know about Victor's powers. They're very slow on the uptake here. Also, I want to point out the scene where Diego, Five, and Klaus discover Harold's body takes place in the middle of the day. Victor murdered Harold at nighttime. But it's on the same day. I can't do this anymore. Back at the academy, Allison is still alive, but her vocal cords are fucked up and she won't be able to talk anymore. Diego decides to go Hazel and Cha-Cha hunting because this is the best time to do that. He is now wearing, along with the rest of his tactical gear, he has changed out his black turtleneck for like a striped black and blue sweater, except the blue stripes are so subtle that you can only really see them in certain lighting, and I don't like it at all. I think it's kind of silly. Klaus accuses Five of being addicted to the apocalypse because they're both addicts, and Klaus can recognize the symptoms. Five proceeds to smash the glass eye against the wall, which is supposed to symbolize, like, the apocalypse is over, like Five isn't gonna worry about that anymore. So because the apocalypse is over, Five makes a brat green margarita, drinks it, and then the doorbell rings, and it's Hazel pointing a gun at Five, except he doesn't mean to point the gun. They're gonna have a civil conversation about it, but then Diego starts beating Hazel up. Five is kind of just like watching, kind of like making some smart commentary. It's very funny. And then when Diego starts biting Hazel's ear, Five teleports and smashes a vase over Diego's head because he draws the line at biting. Hazel tells Five that he wants to help stop the apocalypse, but then Five tells him, the apocalypse is over! Also, Hazel gives Five Cha-Cha's gun to prove Diego's innocence. Allison wakes up from almost dying. She is not able to speak, so she writes on a notepad and tries to tell Luther about Victor's powers. He's not getting it, but then Pogo comes in out of nowhere and basically confirms that Victor has powers and that Reginald sedated Victor in order to suppress his powers his entire life. Diego wakes up, he looks very sexy. He asks Five where Hazel is. Five is like, he's gone. He also gave me the gun that was used to kill Patch, so now your name is cleared. But then Diego is like, that doesn't matter, I still want revenge. And Five is like, do you really think that your ex-girlfriend would want you to kill people in her name? Diego doesn't really listen to this, obviously. Victor goes to the academy because he wants to check up on Allison. He meets Luther and they have a little bit of a talk, so he and Luther hug, but while they are hugging, Luther squeezes Victor so tight that Victor passes out, and then Victor wakes up in the padded cell that Reginald built for him, and he is locked in the cell again. Oh my god. Outside of the cell, Diego and Luther and Klaus are arguing about this. Klaus and Diego are very anti-putting Victor in a cage, but Luther's trying to reason with them, being like, Victor's dangerous, his powers are dangerous, he tried to kill Allison. While this is happening, Victor is on the other side of the cage door, just screaming. Even though Diego and Klaus are anti-keeping Victor in a cage, they're not really making any moves to open the door, which I think is a little strange, but I can't really do anything. Allison arrives because she's able to walk apparently, even though she had a near-death experience, and she's also anti-cage. But Luther is like, I'm number one, and I'm also physically bigger than all of you, so Victor stays in the cage. So they all leave. Victor has a meltdown. It's not very good. At the motel, Hazel finds that Cha-Cha is holding Agnes hostage. They have a fight about it. At the exact moment that Agnes is about to die, time freezes, and the handler arrives, and she's like, you guys fucked up. We'll get back to that in a little bit. Five returns Dolores to Gimbel Brothers. Victor is actively having a panic attack in the cage, and he's kind of hallucinating his 13-year-old self talking to him about how everyone is afraid of him and how his siblings have always excluded him and how all of his siblings are just like dad and that his siblings are going to keep him in the cage forever. So 13-year-old Victor goads his adult self into destroying the cage, and he does, and it's so awesome. And then he has his villain transformation moment. So his skin is like bleached white or whatever. His eyes are this like glowing white that's kind of like blue tinged or whatever, and then he just has like what looks like eyeliner just like smudged around his eyes. It's awesome. And then we go over to episode 10. I don't know what I'm pointing at. We go over to episode 10, the white violin. We get a flashback to long, long ago. The point of this flashback is that Reginald had a wife who's dying, and also it's kind of assumed that they're not from Earth, that they're aliens. Reginald takes a jar of what looks like pixie dust, and he opens the jar, and all of the pixie dust floats up into the sky, and nothing ever happens of that, and we don't really get an answer to that for a while. And then we cut to a harbor. It's a random harbor, very Ellis Island kind of. He sees an umbrella shop that is for sale. He discovers umbrellas, and presumably that is how he makes his fortune as a billionaire, by selling umbrellas. Okay, so in the present day timeline, Victor, in his full like villain era, is going up the old-timey elevator, and there are hallucinations of 13-year-old Victor and 4-year-old Victor standing alongside him because he has been liberated now, okay? He's free from his prison. He's using his powers for evil and destruction. The academy is crumbling. It is falling apart. All of the siblings are trying to evacuate. Victor is going down the hallway where all of their bedrooms are, and he's sort of seeing these memories of all of his siblings excluding him, and once the memories like finished, he blows up the bedrooms, except some of the memories are kind of valid, because 13-year-old Ben and 13-year-old Klaus tell Victor that he can't go on a mission because he doesn't have any powers and he doesn't have any training, which is harsh, but it's true. Why would you go on the mission if you don't have any training? 13-year-old Luther and 13-year-old Allison tell Victor to get out of Allison's room because they were making out and Victor interrupted him. So that is also like a valid reason to be like, please leave. Diego, 13-year-old Diego, is just being an asshole. So that's really cool of him. While they are running out of the house, Diego gets knocked out by falling debris because he's doing side quests and he's looking for Grace. Klaus tries to wake him up, but that doesn't work, so Ben pulls them out of the way of a huge ceiling chunk falling on top of them before they can get crushed. Diego thinks that Klaus is the one that saved him. Klaus doesn't really correct this. Also, Grace dies. Pogo tries talking Victor down from his murderous rampage, but when Pogo admits that he knew all along that Victor had powers and that he was being drugged, Victor kills Pogo in retaliation. Luther sees this. R.I.P., may you rest in peace. Love that. Okay, so the mansion crumbles apart. It's fallen, it's broken, it's gone. But the apocalypse is still on. Wait a minute, but I thought the apocalypse was done. Nuh-uh-uh. 5 declares that the apocalypse is still on because of the newspaper that he's holding. The newspaper that he is holding at that current moment is the same newspaper that he found on the day he arrived at the apocalypse. So they all realize that Victor is the cause of the apocalypse. Harold might have been the fuse, but Victor is the bomb. At the motel, the handler assigns Hazel and Cha-Cha to protect Victor. This doesn't matter. Victor still goes to the concert because he is an artist, even though he is still in his villain era. It's kind of sexy. The rest of the siblings have reconvened at a bowling alley because their house is gone. Luther and 5 are pro stopping Victor. Everyone else is anti-stopping Victor. Klaus tries to tell the siblings that Ben is the one that saved Diego from the falling rubble. Obviously, none of them believe him because Ben is dead. Luther is really mean to Klaus about this, so Klaus, in retaliation, spills the beans that Luther lost his virginity to someone other than Allison, and Allison gets upset by this. Luther tries to explain to Allison that it was like, oh, it didn't mean anything, and I took a lot of drugs, and I was drinking a lot. Allison doesn't care. Instead, she enlists Luther's help in calling Claire, because if the world is ending tonight, baby, let me talk to my daughter, except I have no voice. So they call Claire, and Luther has to talk for Allison, and it's very sweet, except it's really obvious that everything that he's saying to Claire is what he actually wants to say to Allison. Like, in the context of what he's saying to Claire, it doesn't really make sense, but whatever, I have to get over it. While this is happening, a woman at the bowling alley mistakes Klaus and Diego for being 5's dads, which is awesome. 5 gets a message from the handler being like, let's meet, let's make another deal. While 5 is reading this message, there's a background conversation of Diego and Klaus arguing, and then Diego's like, if I were to date a man, which kind of solidifies that he's not bisexual, and it kind of upsets me, because I want my men to be bisexual. Is that a crime? No, it's not. 5 ditches to go meet with the handler. It's awesome. While 5 is gone, the rest of the siblings form a plan, and the extent of the plan is to go to the theater where Victor's playing at. That is the extent of the plan. But before they can actually like hash out a real plan, commission agents wearing bright red gas masks storm the bowling alley and start shooting it up because they want to kill the siblings, I suppose. They don't really engage in a fight beyond like throwing things at them, but the siblings all run down the bowling lanes, that's what they're called, the bowling lanes, and then they jump into the secret back rooms where the bowling pins are stored. Don't know what those rooms are called, never been there, but it's a cool scene. Hazel and Cha-Cha have a heart-to-heart while they are protecting Victor. Hazel knows that the handler isn't going to save them from the apocalypse, even though that was part of their deal. And then Hazel uses the velocity of the car to chuck Cha-Cha out through the front windshield, and this is lethal. So Cha-Cha is dead. Rest in peace, Cha-Cha. She's dead. Okay, at the motel, the handler and 5 meet. The handler is just really predatory and creepy towards 5. That's kind of all it is. But the important part of this is that soon after 5 leaves, Hazel arrives and shoots the handler dead. Awesome. Great. I didn't like her anyways. I'm glad she's dead. Okay, at the theater. We're so close to the end, guys. Victor is playing, obviously, because he's first chair. He's doing very well despite not being at rehearsal for the past 3 days or something like that. Allison goes into the auditorium house to get to Victor, while the boys being Luther and Diego, Klaus is on lookout duty. Luther and Diego go through the wings. I don't know how they got backstage to do this, but they somehow managed to get backstage. Allison is kind of just walking down the aisle and then stopping in the middle of the aisle, effectively blocking people's viewpoint of the orchestra. And a lot of people give Allison side eyes for this, and I agree with them. Don't stop in the middle of the fucking aisle. Also, Victor sees Allison just in the audience. And no, he doesn't, because the stage lights are blinding him. He can't see anything. There's no way he saw Allison. Regardless of this, Luther and Diego bum rush the stage from the wings and try to tackle Victor, I guess, but Victor, because he has foresight or prescience or whatever, uses his bow to send a shockwave of sound or something out into the audience, and it shoves Luther and Diego away from him into the audience, and then also the rest of the audience screams and they start running away. The orchestra tries to run away too, but then Victor does the same like movement with his bow at the orchestra, so they keep playing. He's like forcing them to continue to play. It's really funny. While this is happening, the commission agents in the red gas mask show up at the theater and start shooting up the theater. Klaus and Ben return because they had gone to get a burrito. 5 returns to find that the place is getting shot up. It's not good for the team. But then Klaus summons Ben. Ben turns corporeal. He has like a physical form now, except he's like glowing blue, so it's not really physical. And Ben uses his tentacle portal stomach thing to unleash his tentacle monster and kill all of the commission agents. Also, Cha-Cha isn't fucking dead. She's not fucking dead because she shows up at the theater and then Diego immediately starts beating her up and he's about to kill her, but then he remembers the conversation he had with 5 like an episode ago where 5 was like, I don't think Eudora would want you to kill people in her memory. So Diego doesn't kill Cha-Cha, and he's a better man than me because I would have killed her. Like, she annoys me. Oh my goodness. So after the commission agents are dead and Cha-Cha has been kind of dealt with, the remaining siblings come up with a plan to surround Victor and try to overwhelm him before Victor can finish the concert, because they think that if Victor finishes the concert, that is how the world ends. So the boys try, once again, bum rushing the stage, except Victor can obviously see them, and he uses his powers to lift them into the air and start sucking out their life force. I don't know how this is happening. I don't know why Victor has this power, but he does. It's awesome. Except Allison is standing right behind Victor with a gun held at Victor's. Allison's going to shoot Victor in the back of the head, but then instead of shooting Victor in the back of the head, Allison moves the gun so that it's right next to Victor's ear, and then she shoots. Victor's powers kind of stop, they kind of go inward, and then they blast out kind of like Iron Man style, and they blast, and the blast hits the moon! Oh baby! Victor passes out after this. It's worth noting that Victor's suit has turned white. It was a black suit, now it's white. His violin has also turned completely white. This is the villain alter ego, the white violin. Awesome, we saved Victor, we saved the world, except we didn't save the world because the moon got hit by Victor's power beam, and now a chunk of moon rock is hurtling towards the earth, and that is how the earth is going to end. That is how the apocalypse starts, because the moon was split by Victor's power beam. Awesome. So 5 is still in his stop the apocalypse mentality, so he convinces the rest of the family he's going to time travel them away from there so that they can try again and try and stop the apocalypse again. So they all hold hands and they are all engulfed in the blue lightning storm that is 5's powers. You know, as 5 is gearing up to time travel them, the remaining siblings, all of the siblings, revert back to their 13-year-old forms, and then they just vanish, just as the flames of the apocalypse swallow them up, and then a My Chemical Romance song plays over the credits, and that is the end of Season 1 of The Umbrella Academy. Boom! We're done! Yeah! So this is what the flowchart looks like at the end of Season 1. Obviously we have all of our siblings. They are still alive because they managed to time travel to God knows where, right before the apocalypse hit. Hazel and Agnes are also still alive because we also see them time travel away to an undisclosed location and time before the apocalypse hits. So they're still alive, but everyone else dead. Awesome. Thanks so much for watching. I don't know when Season 2 will be up. I don't know if Season 2 will be up. Keep an eye out for that. Listen to my podcast. I'm sure that the only people who watch this video are my friends that I do the podcast with, but if you're not, listen to my podcast. The link is down below, and I will see you next time. Bye!